I'm going live. Alrighty. YouTube says we are live, so hello. This is AV Rant. This is the behind-the-scenes version, if you're watching this particular video. Episode number 658. We're recording here, and yeah. Our behind-the-scenes videos are pretty darn complete these days, so you're not missing much if you're watching behind the scenes. But if you'd like the completed video with cleaned-up audio, that's the main thing, because I've got my fan going in the background. So that noise will be gone in the completed version. Those posts later in the week. I think that is the preamble. Don't need to say much else these days. It's all right. How's Tom doing over there? Making faces.
I wish I had any time at all to go through these questions before. It makes it so hard to read them. Whatever.
Still not used to my writing.
No, your writing's fine. That's not it. It's just dry reading these things. I feel like my camera is like super off.
Well, please don't touch it too much. Oh, God.
But it's
well, it doesn't
like
matter though. This is what they see is what I've cropped. Oh God.
I'm moving it.
Why?
Because I have to look at the camera.
Oh, well, now I gotta recrop you.
So they recrop it. It's fine.
Time wasted. Jeez.
Whatever. Time, oh, give me time.
Had it all fine. All right, hold on now. Let's see. Let's put you there.
Just to aggravate him.
Let's put you there. Let's see if that's... You gotta hold still. I don't know where you are.
I'm here. This is where I'll be.
That's where you are now? How are you there now?
It looks the same to me on my screen.
Well, no, you moved. I'm only dealing with half a screen, so it's like amplified. All right, I got to move you over a little bit more now, the opposite direction from where you were before. All right, 300 and 340.
It's freaking me out.
There you go. Good enough.
Either to do a podcast or during the podcast. You choose.
So better now. Better before the actual podcast starts.
I finally saw Endgame. We'll talk about the podcast.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yep, on your bike.
On my bike? What the hell does that mean?
On your way.
That's a saying?
Very much
That's
so,
a saying.
Yes.
On your bike?
Yeah.
Like your bicycle?
Yeah.
Or your...
Yeah.
That has never been said before. That is
it's
literally the first time those words have ever been uttered to me outside of get on your bike. That's the only time.
Like literally on your bike, not figuratively as I'm using it.
Right.
No.
Yes.
No. On your bike is what you say. You would say get going.
Never. No. It's never been said. You just made that up.
I did not.
Like
you can look it up.
It can be a Canadian.
It could very much be a Canadian Britishism. That could very much be the case.
But I lived in Australia, and I got a lot of that Britishism in my bloodstream. It's fine. So I kind of think I speak mildly Canadian, but I've never heard that before on a bike. Pretty
sure Austin Powers said it at one point.
Whatever. Austin Powers an idiot. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. It was crazy movie announcement week this week. Spider-Man leaving the MCU apparently, and then possibly being back in as like 2 places reported, but nothing officially said. And then there's a new Matrix movie because everyone's like, oh wait, Keanu Reeves is super hot right now. I'm sure he'll still be super hot in 3 years when the next Matrix movie is ready. So they're making another one. But yeah,
Carrie-Anne Moss hasn't made a movie in a long time.
But she was in Jessica Jones at least. So.
Oh, you're right, and she still looks pretty good.
Yeah. So
I mean, and I don't mean that as some sort of sexist way. I'm just talking about like she still looks young enough to be in a Matrix movie. Yeah, she hasn't gotten all wrinkly or whatever. But
as a continued love interest for Keanu Reeves, who does not age very much at all. That guy,
he dies. He dies in the movie, doesn't he? In the last movie,
in the third
doesn't
Matrix
he
movie.
get sacrificed?
Yeah, it's the Matrix. Whatever.
They're just going to MCU them both.
Here's my prediction.
It's going to get to the point where it's going to be like Sean Connery's going to go back to playing James Bond, and they're just going to MCU his face so he looks young again.
Wow. You never know. He could be better. No, here's my prediction for how they're going to do the Matrix. When they start the 4th Matrix movie, they're just going to be like, when everybody died or Keanu died in the 3rd one, he wakes up again because like everything computer-wise, you would think it would be redundant. There would be redundant systems. So I think what he woke up into in the 2nd one was just like a redundant system. He's still inside a computer program. He didn't, that's my prediction. That's what I thought the third one was going to be honest.
There's a new. What is it? It's a remake. No, it's not a remake. There's another movie that they're having a sequel to that's coming out this year, I think. I watched like a video of trailers.
Well, there's like another Bill and Ted coming out.
Not that. No, there was something else.
On
that
the Keanu train.
I was like, what's that? No, it wasn't Keanu. Oh my God. I remember seeing it thinking, this is the same movie. They haven't changed it. It looks like exactly the same movie as the first one from the trailer. So I'll remember it as we go through. But yeah, so I finally saw Endgame.
Okay.
Sat through that 3-hour slog. You were right. Okay, so it's like a love letter to all the characters, the original MCU characters and all of that. It was definitely, it had a lot going on there. As far as the first 2 hours of it. And there was the Russo brothers did a really good job.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned with both those movies. Yeah. So those guys can write their own tickets at this point.
No kidding. They've done it at least 3 times now. So
yeah, so they've done a very good job. So it was a good movie. It's not to me, it's not Infinity War good, but I think for people who care more about plot and less about things blowing up.
They're also, they really are 2 parts of one story, so.
Yeah, they are. They are, for sure. But you know what? As far as things that have been broken in half or in thirds go, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
They really broke it in half in a good way. Like, Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, like Volume 1 ended and you're like, oh my God, that was great. And Volume 2 started, you're like, okay, so when's the rest of this movie going to start? Because it was like the first hour of it was like, okay, we got to fill this out somehow before we get to the action at the end. But yeah, so saw it. Good.
On
movie.
disc, streamed, how was it viewed?
Yes. Okay. Because my kids are terrible people. I watched it on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Even though I have the 4K disc.
Oh. But you don't have a 4K display.
I don't, but I have Atmos and everything. So I think the Blu-ray is still in Atmos, so I will not.
I don't know on that release.
Any of them. I think it is. I thought it was.
Was the 4K disc destroyed or something? Is this what you're implying?
No, they just didn't put it in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I let them insert the disc, and they just put in the Blu-ray disc, and I found out after I took it out, and I was like, you monsters, I have to watch this thing again. So.
Well, your dynamic range picture-wise was probably actually correct that way anyway, because sometimes bringing the HDR picture down into standard dynamic range for display doesn't always work perfectly. So
yeah, but it was good. It was good flick. It's definitely worth seeing. Yeah. So all right, let's get on with this. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us a question at avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com. When it's up, I think it's down right now.
I didn't check. I don't know.
It's probably done.
It is the end of the month. I'm not even going to bother trying to check. I'll leave it alone.
You can leave a comment there. Just email us a question at
avrant.com, please. Yes, please.
Or facebook.com/AVRant podcast. Those are the 2 places that you should hit us up. Everything else is kind of, don't worry about it. You're going to hear thunder. We have a storm rolling in here. It's been growling out there for the last hour. So it's going to come, and I'm sorry about that.
As of August 27th at 7 in the morning Pacific time, 10 in the morning Eastern time, avrant.com is still up and functional. We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah. If you want to see our videos, they're AVRant. YouTube.com/AVRant. All right. Contact Rob directly. Rob at AVRant.com. His Twitter is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter is at AVRant_Tom. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, I do support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can sign up for a monthly subscription. It's like, just monthly donations to our podcast you don't have to think about.
That's right. You set it up once, and they just keep taking money from you until you say stop.
Yeah. So we want to thank our 85 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yes, we do. That's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, thanks very much to our 85 patrons over there. And if you're thinking, I don't want to do an automatic monthly donation and donate every single month, I just want to donate one time, you can do that via PayPal. If you come to our website, avrant.com, over on the right-hand side, it says support AV Rant. There's a picture of a cup of coffee, and it will take you to PayPal. Haven't had any PayPal donations in a while.
No, we haven't. And I think it's because everybody's trying to donate at the end of the month when they get paid.
That could be.
The website's down constantly. Save the link. The link will still work. It doesn't go to a AV Rant site. It goes to a PayPal site. All right. If you can't support us financially, figure out some other way to support us and let us know what you did so we can mention you. Tom, who we talked about last week, he let Elite Home Theater Seating and Accessories for Less know that his purchases were thanks to us. He also wanted to share a bit more about info regarding the movie posters he has mounted onto his absorption panels. This was the large, very beautiful theater that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like he had fabric banners over his absorption panels on his side walls. That's what it looked like. Anyways, he says he built the absorption panels with the help of a friend, and the posters were hand-painted on flour sacks in Guyana. Does that mean he lives in Guyana? I mean,
I don't think so.
Super specific. I mean, how do you get... Anyways, so there are projectionists who move from town to town there, and they have a tradition of using these painted posters to promote their upcoming shows. They are just hung with nails or stapled to his acoustic panel. So burlap is completely acoustically transparent. Mm-hmm. So that's great. These things, I didn't even really look at the posters, but they're like all these random Land of Doom. Was it Snake Man? Is that what that one says? It looks like it says Snake Man.
Yeah, that does say Snake Man.
Bullet. First Bullet. Is that the back one?
No, that does say First Blood. So I'm not sure if they actually were showing the real First Blood.
Oh, it could
I'm not
be.
sure. It's somebody's squad. I can't quite make out whose squad. Somebody's squad is over there.
That could be
Suicide Squad. There's a Rambo, First Blood again, the Throne of Fire, and I think that's Beastmaster over there in the back corner.
That is definitely Beastmaster. Oh, I didn't see the second picture down here.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, yes. So, anyways, I'm guessing he got these from like eBay or something like that, which is gonna steal that idea. I mean, these are awesome. These are super awesome, and because while they have the names of copyrighted works on them, they are original works of art.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they are not copyrighted in any way. So there's nothing wrong with you buying them. So fantastic idea.
Yep.
How have I never heard of this?
I don't know. And I love the idea of having images that you can change up if and when you want to. You don't have to actually replace the entire panel or rewrap an entire panel. You're just, sticking an additional piece of fabric that has a lovely printed image on it on top of your existing panel that stays up the whole time, and you just use it as a nice, lovely backdrop that looks like a frame. So I think that's a fantastic idea. We are stealing it. Love it.
It's so awesome. All right. You need to add that to your how to make absorption panels thing.
Well, I didn't write that. That was a Rob W.
That was other Rob. We should addendum that thing.
Sure.
See if we can figure out where we
got
those
idea.
From. All right. In the news, KEF has expanded their Q series lineup with the addition of the new Q250C center model. It's a smaller than the existing 650C model, using 5.25-inch drivers instead of 6.5, and notably it's a sealed cabinet design, so it's a bit more flexible in terms of placement options, and can also be used either vertically or horizontally for LCR duties. Price is $600 each, with black, white, and walnut finish options, and grills cost extra. Really?
That's what KEF is doing with that Q series these days. I'm not sure why, but they do not come with grills in the box. They're like $20 a piece extra.
That's just stupid. I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay, because we're having a renovation done on our. When we moved to this house, this whole house was renovated and perfect and lovely, except the home theater needed to be fixed up because I didn't like the shape of it, because it was L instead of a very small L instead of a very small rectangle, and one bathroom was like original from like the 50s, and it's just disgusting. So it's the guest bathroom. It's the one that everybody uses. So my wife has been harping on that for years. We sold our house up in Jacksonville, and part of that,
congrats.
Thank you. Part of that is money is going into that. So we're doing this renovation. So yesterday I was shopping for toilets, and you want to make somebody angry? Sell them a toilet without a seat.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah.
But that's how they come.
Yep.
Many of them come without a seat, and
with
this is the same sort of deal.
Thinnest plastic seat you've ever seen that you would never want to use.
Right, and I'm like, just don't do that instead, and put an extra $20 or $40 onto the price, and put a decent seat on there. It's the same thing here. It's stupid not to sell them with grills, but KEF, you do you. Aside from the oodles of content announced by Disney in their D23 event, some of which I watched, yeah, the video I watched like skipped around a whole bunch, but I'm very it's November. It's being launched
November
officially.
12th
Is that right?
is when the Disney Plus streaming service is coming out, and a lot of the shows that they announced at D23 aren't premiering until 2021. So they are a good year and a half away.
I'll
least.
see you in 2021, sir.
That's like
it's not like you're going to take the new stuff off, right?
Well, even like I think they even said that what's his name, Falcon and Winter Soldier isn't premiering until 2021 now for some weird reason. So I don't know. Things are off in the future, but yeah, they announced what Moon Knight, She-Hulk, and Ms. Marvel are 3 more MCU shows coming to Disney Plus. There's a couple of Star Wars. Live action Mandalorian and
The Mandalorian I saw, yeah,
with Pablo Hidalgo reprising his role from Rogue One. That's going to be another separate one, and then they're bringing the Clone Wars back for another season, animated season. So
I hated the
oodles and oodles of stuff was announced. So you can check out.
I went to the movies.
Stuff.
I don't think you guys probably remember that on this podcast. I went to the movies to see that first episode of Clone Wars back in the day with my kids, with my kid. All right. They confirmed that Disney Plus will include up to 4 simultaneous streams in 4K resolution with Dolby Vision HDR and Atmos audio available, all at the regular $6.99 a month price. Individual profiles up to 7 can be created with 1 subscription, and content can be downloaded on mobile devices. It's true of Netflix as well.
It is, but to get 4K and HDR and Atmos, you have to pay for the topmost tier, and Disney Plus is like,
that's true.
At least at the I mean, obviously the price of Disney Plus is going to go up probably pretty quick, but in order to onboard everyone in the world, they're like, here's our one low price, lower than just about anybody else's streaming service.
It is, yeah. It is.
And right away, no tiers. You just get all the stuff that anybody else is offering, the highest quality available, 4 simultaneous streams. So it's all there. They're basically trying to remove any reason you might say to not sign up for Disney Plus. Oh boy, they're just taking over the world, that company. And yet, Apple could buy them about 80 times over just with the money in their bank. So, yeah.
Talk about Apple. All right. Some comments here. Herb from Cross Spectrum Labs heard a discussion about Matt's custom apartment built in his apartment build in Australia, and wanted to inform us and Matt that sound absorptive plaster does in fact exist. Mm-hmm. I was like, really? Anyways, it's very expensive, he warns, mainly because installing it is a multi-layered, time and labor-intensive process that needs to be done by trained professionals. Different colors are available, but the dye needs to be pre-mixed. You cannot use normal paint after installation, which makes sense. You would whatever sound absorber. So, Matt, there you go. You'll have to ship in some dudes from America to make it happen. But or maybe they have them in Australia too. But yes. It exists. So,
and here are some details, some names to look out for if you want to.
All right. So Pyrok, right? Pyrok, offers full plaster solutions, but to be effective across a fairly wide range of frequencies, it needs to be quite thick and requires reinforced wire grids if used on the ceiling. So the Baswa Fawn, BASWA, new word PHON. Solution might work better in Matt's case. It's essentially a mineral wood layer with a special marble-based top coating.
That's a mineral wool, actually. So same.
What
it's like you said, wood. So mineral wool layer, exactly like rock wool. You know, the type of insulation you would have inside of your walls. So it's a layer of that with like then a special marble-based type of coating on top of that.
You want your ceiling to look like marble?
Well, I mean, you can, again, texture and dye the marble to look like just about anything. Can't paint it afterwards. So that one seems to be a little easier. The Pyrock one is interesting. I mean, I was looking at their solutions, and like if you put up a 1/2-inch thick layer, which would, be akin to a normal drywall layer, it's basically only effective at 2 kilohertz, like with a window from maybe 1 to 4 kilohertz, right? With the peak definitely being at 2 kilohertz, and to have anything outside of that, it needs to be at least 1 inch, probably 1.5 inches thick, which is a lot of weight when it's all plaster to be hanging off of your ceiling, which is why I mean, it's not rebar, but it's the idea of like a wire grid to hold in all. So it's a lot to put in that Pyrock system. The Boswa Fawn system looks more reasonable to me, but very labor intensive for that too. So,
All right, Matt, let us know if you look into those and what you decide to do. And if you do install one of those, please take lots of pictures and send them to us.
Yeah, because the finished thing, you can't really tell. By looking at the finished pictures, you're like, that looks like drywall or plaster. It's all the stuff underneath that you can't see that was done beforehand. Yeah.
All right, Aaron. Aaron's the president of AC Customs in Canada. He wanted to mention for Stefan, who was looking to add an inexpensive soundbar to his Pioneer Curo monitor in his bedroom, that even though the Curo monitors do have what appears to be an optical audio output, it's not a normal Toslink output. You cannot plug all of your sources into the HDMI inputs of your Curo monitor and then have it send the audio out to the soundbar. All of the audio needs to be handled externally, which in retrospect makes sense.
Yeah, it is a pro monitor. It is not a TV, so it doesn't have a tuner in there. It doesn't have anything audio-wise in there as far as that goes. So you can't use your Curo monitor like a HDMI audio switch. Yeah, as you could with a normal TV. So that, I mean, that's okay. I mean, as long as because I mean, most soundbars have more than one input. And you might be looking at a combination of an optical switch and a regular red and white RCA switch or something like that. But I mean, both of those can be gotten super cheap. You don't have to be going and getting a full AV receiver to do that type of switch.
And if you're running an HDMI cable up to your Curo anyway, it's running an optical cable right next to it it's not really a big deal. So, right. All right, Chris. Chris wanted to mention for Zach, who asked last week if it's worth trying to get the networking hardware in his Denon receiver repaired outside of warranty, that it's worth checking if he automatically gets extended warranty coverage from his credit card. Chris says that the HDMI board in his Denon X4300H malfunctioned after he was past the manufacturer's warranty period, but thankfully the staff at his local repair shop told him to check with his credit card company. Indeed, he had extended warranty coverage through them. He had to upload some paperwork and file a claim based on the estimate given to him by the repair shop, but it was worth that small hassle as the credit card company paid the repair bill in full for him. So this is quite literally news to me. I have no problem on this podcast admitting my ignorance on things, and this is one that would never have crossed my mind in a million years.
I have certainly seen in the agreements and features and perks and stuff. Yep, extended coverage on everything that you buy is just something that I didn't think to mention. It didn't cross my mind at all. So Chris, thank you for mentioning that, because it is a good thing to keep in mind. Certainly doesn't hurt to check.
And Martin on Twitter wanted to share the 3-part guide to designing a home theater by Dr. Floyd Toole. It's a highly condensed summary of topics covered in his book, Sound Reproduction, that quickly covers the basics of room acoustics, sound system layout and setup, and speaker and amplifier requirements. It contains page references for the full book for further reading. Martin thinks it's a great resource that our listeners might appreciate. So thank you very much, Martin.
Yep. For anyone who was just saying, I'd like to read up on some of this stuff and get a little better understanding of acoustics and layouts and how much amplifier power I need in general, and that it's a good primer for all of that type of stuff.
Yeah. All right, let's get some questions in here. Mike says, thanks for all the suggestions we made regarding his room treatments and the plan that Gick put together for him. We said that how almost all of it could be done DIY by building super chunks and just using basic framing and fabric for a lot of the rest. He's run out of money in his budget to do everything in the way of room treatments all at once, so he's prioritizing what should he tackle first. I think he needs a stand for a center channel.
That's okay. These are older pictures. I'm still using some of the first ones he sent in.
I know it's a funny picture because it looks like it's got 2 receiver boxes underneath.
It's 2 boxes for the bird on-wall speakers that he's got there.
On-wall speakers.
It gets them up to about the right height, so that's okay. So if you are prioritizing your acoustic treatments, now remember he was saying he actually has an outright bit of a slap echo still, even though he is fully carpeted in here. Right. Other than that, he doesn't really have anything. He's got a coffered ceiling, large, deep bays in his ceiling, nothing in any of those or on the rest of the lower part of the ceiling, and nothing on the walls or the back wall. So it's just the carpet in there right now as far as anything absorptive goes. So what's first things first?
Well, I mean, if you've got a slap echo that you're worrying about, then it's back wall first. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it's really first reflection points, back wall. Those are the first 2 things I do,
and
no matter what.
Those could definitely be DIY.
Yes.
We were talking about how on the sidewalls, this was actually Gick's idea, but we fully agreed with it, on the sidewalls up front. So I agree with Gick's notion of, he's basically got this space going from where the screen is on the sidewall, parallel to or perpendicular to the screen on the sidewall, up to sort of the door on the left and the niche that he's got for his equipment on the right. Since he wants to do it DIY, just put in framing on both sides the whole way on the sidewall, 3-inch thick framing, basically regular insulation in there, and cover the whole thing in fabric, because that's one of the easiest and least expensive things that you could do, and that will help as far as the front sound staging and imaging goes. And then your back wall could be a similar thing. You want to go thicker on the back wall if you can. I mean, if you can do like 6 inches thick, that'd be great. Do at least 4.
I bet that's gonna be in front of his rear speaker, 6 inches.
That's true.
I would think.
But try to do at least 4 on that back wall. That should work all right. And again, that could be DIY. I'm not sure. I think he was talking about how he might want to have some printed panels, but I think that was only on the sides at the back.
How do you feel about ordering things from Ghana?
That's right. Well, that's just the other thing. You could just do some basic black panels at the back and then get printed fabric and just tack that on top later if you want the printed image. So that's a great way to come
I'm
at it.
absolutely in love with this idea, by the way.
Yeah.
Now that I've seen that theater, I'm in love with it.
You could do it in your own.
My panels are 2 feet by 2 feet. Every panel in here except for that one, which is 2 by 4, and that one's less than 2 by 4 because of the wall it's on is not 2.
You can still do it. Wide. You can get something printed on fabric and put it on there.
Sure.
Yeah,
I could. All that's good. So he wants to double check what's the function of the toggle switch on his Focal Superbird speakers. It says one setting is for on wall and the other setting is for on stand. So he obviously went with the on wall setting in his case. But what does that switch actually do? What it does is it changes the crossover and some of the voicing of the speaker so that
I'm not sure if it's into a crossover. I thought it was just the low end. I thought it was just the.
Well, I mean, that's part. I mean, that's changing the crossover. I mean, how is that not changing?
Well, no, because the crossover is
low end filter.
The crossover is where the woofer is meeting the tweeter. I thought it was only the low end, the low pass for the woofer.
Could be.
I think that's what it's changing.
Yeah. So basically, what it does is it takes into account the wall reinforcement that's going to happen. You got that hard surface right behind you. The bass is going to wrap around the speaker and then bounce off that back wall, and that is going to amplify those lower frequencies. So it just kind of
it's a boundary compensation switch. It basically just makes it so that when you are on the wall, it is playing the deeper bass that it's able to play a little quieter. That's pretty much all it is. When it's on stands and out away from the walls, it boosts up the deep bass that the speaker is able to play a little bit because it's not getting that boundary reinforcement.
Yeah, it may be exactly the opposite of what we just said too. It may be it does nothing when it's next to a wall and then it boosts the bass when it's out in the room. We don't exactly
it just means
know
away from the wall on a stand, the bass will be louder.
You get more bass.
Yeah. One way or another, either by curtailing it when it's in the on-wall switch or by boosting it when it's in the on-stand switch. But
somewhere.
Either way, away from the wall, bass is louder from the speaker itself.
Justin says that he is totally blind, but he still enjoys home theater. And since for him, audio is 100% of the experience, he's excited to try Atmos. And dude, if anybody's going to enjoy it, it's going to be you. Your hearing is a lot better than the rest of us, probably a lot more acute. So he's in an open style apartment. So his space is about 17 feet wide by 25 feet long by 9 feet high. That's a nice size. He's sitting 8 feet from his front wall, and there's lots of space behind him. So he's set up by 5.1 surround sound system. And so as far as the floor level goes, he would like to keep it that way. His surround speakers are 7 feet to either side and just slightly behind a seat.
That sounds perfect.
I know it does to me too. He'd like to get 2 pairs of speakers that could be mounted on his ceiling as Atmos overheads. This is a rental apartment, so no in-ceiling speakers, and he'd like them to be small, easy to mount, and $300 max for all 4. He said 2 pairs. Oh, 2 pairs. Sorry. What would we suggest? Well, so we would have suggested the Focal
Little Birds back when they were available, but they are no longer available, so can't do that.
How much are the Boston Acoustic ones?
Yeah, so the Boston Acoustic Soundwear 4.5, which you can get from Accessories for Less, are $70 each. So that is perfect. 4 of them would be just under $300. $70 each for those Boston Soundwear. Now, so he won't be able to see the images that I'm showing. They are not tiny. It is a 4.5-inch woofer. And then there is a case around that. So they're not teeny tiny, but they also aren't gigantic. They are definitely very easy to mount. They come with an integrated pivot mount that's built right into them. Very easy to just put in there with some drywall anchors because they are not super heavy, so they don't have to go into a stud. That isn't necessary. Some basic drywall anchors, you'd put that in with the integrated mount that comes with it, and you can, I mean, we're going to tell you to just aim them straight down. But if you want to, it's a full pivot ball mount. You can aim them whatever direction you please if you so choose.
Yeah, that would be my kind of go-to. I'm glad that I'm finally able to recommend these speakers. I saw them before they were released at the Boston Acoustic event, and it was, at the time, I thought they were, whole home audio, maybe surround back duty, but I didn't really see much of a use for them. But suddenly with Atmos, these things have a new lease on life.
And also before they were at Accessories for Less, they were like 1.5 times more expensive than they are now. So they're much more affordable, and they fit a good use case for that. I will also mention, in case... because he's saying that even though he's not seeing that, he still cares very much about aesthetics. That's coming up in the next part of his question. But for the speakers as well, if you have a white ceiling and you would prefer a white finish on the speaker, Kef's E301, that is a discontinued speaker at this point, but Accessories for Less still has some available for sale. So that is available in a white finish. Now, those they're selling for $200 for a pair. So that would be over the budget he's looking for, be $400 for 2 pairs of them.
I thought the Soundwear had all kinds of different
well,
colors.
I only see...
That was their deal.
I only see black available at Accessories for Less, though.
That might be the truth. That might be true, but I know when I saw them, they had them in red.
They do look like the type of speaker that
cream,
would easily come in other finishes. So
they had all kinds of finishes. So might be worth calling Accessories for Less and seeing if that's an option. If if somebody cares about the color of their speakers on their ceiling. So, yeah. All right. He says he won't be seeing wires, but he still cares about the cleanliness of the setup and the aesthetics of his apartment. If there's some way to do this wirelessly so that the wire won't have to run up the ceiling, no. Because even if you did that, you would still have to plug in whatever it was that was up there that was wirelessly receiving the signal.
There would still be wires, and you would still need
wire
power connectors, and that it would not look clean like you're hoping for. This isn't some...
Not without installing the wires in the ceiling. So just so that we are all understanding, in order to be wireless, you have to have a wireless transmitter at the source and a wireless receiver at the speaker. Okay, and each one of those things is going to need power. So yes, you will not have to run a speaker wire, but you will have to run Romex,
right?
Or you have to plug it in. Now this is fine if you are going from the front of the room to the back of the room, where there's wall outlets everywhere behind couches and stuff, and you can just plug stuff in. Well, then it looks wireless. But on a ceiling, that's not the case.
Then you would still, this would be the wireless receiver in this case, would also have to be an amplifier. And those do exist, like Amphony, a company that we recommend often. That's AMPHONY, by the way, Amphony. They do have where the wireless receiving unit is also an amplifier. They have also one where it's like a stereo amplifier, so it powers 2 speakers, or individual amplifiers. You get one separate little receiving amplifier unit for each speaker, but then you still need to run a speaker wire from that to the speaker. So it's not truly... I mean, if your idea is, I won't see anything up there except for these little speakers, nope, that's not going to be the way it looks. So instead of that, what I would recommend to you is flat, paintable, self-adhesive speaker wire, which is readily available from Sewell. They call it Ghost Wire. And it's just this flat, white, self-adhesive and paintable speaker wire that you can just stick to your wall. I mean, if you don't want to paint it, you don't have to if you're okay with just the flat. I mean, if your walls and ceiling are already white and this is close enough, then you don't even have to bother painting it. But yeah, flat and self-adhesive, easy to run up there. You do need some little blocks at each end that convert the super-duper flat wire back into something regular speaker wire can connect to. But you just get these little plastic terminal blocks that terminate on either end. That can be quite easily hidden just in behind the speaker up on the ceiling, so you don't have to see that little terminal block. And that's about it. That's what I would recommend.
Your other option, of course, is going to be... wire tracks.
Sure, yeah, raceways.
You see people use raceways that you could do, and that those are also paintable, and easily installed and uninstalled. They don't weigh anything, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And some of them may even be adhesive, so then it would just require a little bit of painting afterwards. Those are a little bit more noticeable than what Rob's talking about. They are easier to install than what Rob is talking about, but you at least have a couple options there. So diagrams for speaker layout are of no use to him. He's heard how Atmos speakers should go just in line with the front and surround back speakers, but he doesn't have surround back speakers, and his surrounds are quite far apart. So could we please explain exactly where he should ceiling mount his 4 Atmos speakers for the best angles and imaging? Well, in your case, you should put them in line with your front speakers, unless your front speakers are somehow oddly placed.
Right.
Basically, I would put them, basically over or just outside of your couch, whatever your couch is that you're sitting on. I think that's sort of a good guide, but generally speaking, you want your speakers should be outside of the seating area, so that the imaging is your main left and right speakers should be so that your couch is inside of those two speakers. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, that should be the way it is. And then those speakers would be in line with those. Now, the surround speakers, for a lot of reasons, are not going to be in that, but the surround backs would be in line. It's kind of that track over your head, like an arc over your head. But if they're not perfectly in line with each other.
Yeah, I mean, if you were able to see the diagrams, a lot of this stuff is described in angles. And so to convert it into something that I think is easier to understand, which is just give you some feet measurements that you could go by. In your case, since you are sitting 8 feet away from your front wall, if you were to go by the angles suggested, it would translate into your Atmos speakers above you being somewhere in the range of 7 to 9 feet apart. Which sounds pretty reasonable. If you have a normal-sized couch that's probably 6.5 or 7 feet wide, then saying that your Atmos speakers are going to be somewhere in the range of 7 to 9 feet apart from each other, that makes it easy. And then since you have a 9-foot ceiling, I'm going to suggest to you that they go 5 feet in front of you and 5 feet behind you. Because normally they're saying they'd go for like a 45-degree elevation angle, which if you have an 8-foot ceiling would put them probably exactly 5 feet in front, 5 feet behind. But I don't want to go too far in front and too far behind, to stay at that exact 45-degree elevation angle. You're allowed to have your top front and your top rear speakers as much as a 55-degree elevation angle. So 5 feet in front of you, 5 feet behind you would be a 50-degree elevation angle. It's perfectly within the recommended angles. And I think that's a good distance. So 7 to 9 feet apart and 5 feet in front, 5 feet behind.
All right, Carl. Carl wants some new power protection. He was using 2 20-year-old Rotel line conditioners for all of his networking and AV gear. Each Rotel unit has 9 outlets, and he's using them all. One of them died, so he'd like to replace it, and he'd rather just replace both Rotel units at the same time. So what would we suggest? Do you need battery backup? I'm guessing that's the real question, because he's just asking for line conditioning and power protection.
I mean, I love to recommend battery backup anyway, because you pretty much never regret having it. But if you don't need it, you can save money. Yes.
Yeah. So if you don't need it, then we're going to recommend.
Yeah, it's going to be APC across the board. So the brand is easy. It's going to be APC, and a tip for people who are in the US or Canada, since they also ship to Canada very easily, B&H Photo Video. They're a great place to buy APC products, often less expensive than Amazon, getting from them. And
honestly, APC, you quite literally do not need our advice. Just look at the back panel and say, does this have everything on here that I need? Because every single product that they make is bulletproof. Yeah. I mean, it is as protected as it can be at that price point, or at that, whatever. They are UL certified, the whole 9 yards. That thing will sacrifice itself. Now, if you were in an area that you were complaining that things were dying constantly because of spikes and stuff like that, we might send you to, what's that other company?
Surgex.
We sometimes talk about Surgex. We would send you there. They are a little bit, they're a lot pricier, but their units are
even beefier and non-self-sacrificial. They don't sacrifice themselves to save your gear. The APC stuff does sacrifice itself. If you get hit with lightning, it will hopefully protect you, but it will sacrifice itself to do it. If you're getting hit with lightning all the time, you do want to go Surgex. That's what they're best for. Yeah.
So if you want battery backup, you're going to go with the J series, and you may need more than one, or you may need a J series and then one of
You
the.
wanted to get 2 units anyway.
H?
Yeah. So yeah, the H units are basically the J units minus a battery. So no battery backup in the H units, but otherwise the same. So the one I love is the J15. This is a unit that has 12 outlets on the back, all of them battery protected. 10 of those outlets do limit you to 12 amps, and 2 of them are labeled as high current, and those let through the full 15 amps. And it's unusual to find 15 amp plus battery backup. So that's what the J15 offers you, and it's a tremendous unit. It does go for about $530, though, so it's not super inexpensive. If you go over to the H15, which subtracts the battery, it's like half the price. It's $270.
And I'll be honest with you, I think I got the H10 for like $100 on sale someplace. So, the H10 basically just subtracts a couple of outlets, and I mean, basically what I'm saying is if you're not desperate to get one right now, Black Friday is your friend, because APC units go on sale all the time for Black Friday. So you can definitely pick up these things on sale as well. But if you need battery backup, this is the one.
Yeah, both the J15 and the H15, they give you independent filter banks. So if you have anything that's got moving parts, a fan, a spinning hard drive or something, put it into one of the smaller filter banks so that it's electrically isolated from your other devices that don't have any moving parts, because usually it's a moving part that creates any electrical noise if it's anything. Like I say, 12 units, all of them battery backed up in the J15. Now, if you want something a little less expensive and you didn't need quite so many outlets, now he needs a minimum of 18. So this is giving you 24, but there is the J35, which goes for about $380. This is a battery backup unit, but still has the full voltage regulation, just like the J15 and the H15 do, and filtering and all the rest of its surge protection. But this one has 8 outlets, 6 of which are battery backup, 2 of which are surge only. That's on the J35 that I'm talking about now. So, I mean, you could do a combination of like a J35 and an H15, because maybe you want some battery backup for a few devices, and the J35 can do that for 6 devices, and then you'd have another 12 outlets from an H15, and altogether, that's pretty darn reasonable for some excellent line conditioning and power protection.
Yeah. On the YouTube video, you may be thinking it's raining because it is storming here. But I'm going to try to remember on the podcast noise reduce that out, but we'll see. So he's got a bunch of Sonos units throughout his house, and he'd like to have some surge protection for them, but many of them are in small spaces where there isn't room for a power strip. Any suggestions? Is there any such thing as a surge protector that's built to fit within a regular single gang outlet box to just replace the regular outlet? Yes?
Those do exist. I'm not a big fan of them. So for example, Best Buy sells their own under the Insignia brand. Goes for about $40, and it is a unit that just fits inside of a regular single gang box. There was another company, one of the other surge protection companies that have one. The reason I'm not a big fan of it is because there's one of the specifications you're going to look for on any surge protector, which is the let-through voltage. And ideally, it's close to or less than 300 volts. You don't really want to let through voltage any higher. Like 330 is sort of the normal IEEE standard that they look for, 330 volts let through. And these in gang box ones don't have that. They're at best 600, and some of them aren't even rated, which means they could be as much as 900 or 1,000 volt let through, which basically might as well not have it. I mean, it might prevent, I don't know what that would prevent. Nothing. Doesn't really help you. So they're almost not worth having. What I would recommend much more highly is back to APC. They have these units. One of them in the AV lineup is called the P4V. Now, this just plugs in where your normal plug is, and it does protrude from the wall somewhat. But keep this in mind. What it does is it gives you outlets on its sides, which are 300 volt let through protected, so it's actually good surge protection on there. Keep in mind that, I mean, just think about any normal plug or wall wart. It sticks out from the outlet a bit, This really doesn't stick out from the outlet anymore, and then it puts the outlets on the sides. So in terms of how much is protruding from the outlet, not much more. Now, they do have in their APC Essentials line one called the P6WU2, which gives you 6 side-mounted outlets. But what I like about that one is it gives you integrated USB plugs. So you can just plug USB devices directly into it without needing an adapter. Although it is only 2.4 amp. It's not the 5 amp USB. So it'd be the slow charging on a lot of things. But it's easy units that I like.
It's plugged in. How much charging does it need?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the P4V goes for about $28, and the P6W is only $14. So pretty inexpensive.
So lastly, he's thinking it might be a good idea to have some surge protection for his SVS cylinder subs. What are our suggestions for that? Well, SVS in almost every subwoofer manufacturer will tell you, do not do this. They will tell you plug directly into the wall. They have fuses that are meant to protect their subs, and they would prefer if their subs had access to the full amount of power that is available to them, because you might decide to watch something at greater than full reference volume, and it has a big hit that the sub empties all of its capacitors all at once, and then asks for a whole bunch of power in a surge protector.
Right.
In a lot of cases, will throttle that, and we've seen cases where the amplifier within the sub is asking for a bunch of power that the surge protector says, hey, that looks like a surge, I better clamp down on it. So then the amplifier says, no, I really need it. And then the surge protector is like, no, this is definitely a surge, I better clamp down on it. It goes back and forth until somebody blows a fuse.
Yep.
So they would rather you plug directly into the wall, and they will tell you that a fuse, a couple $1 fuse will protect that sub, and that's it. But if you're going to get a surge protector because of reasons, and you decide you're going to do it no matter what, you need to get one that allows the full voltage through, 100% access to what's there.
Yep.
And APC will have you there as well, since we've already talked about that before.
They do, yeah. These actually I use on my own SVS subs. It's the P8V. Going up a little ways on the AV lineup, the P8V. Now, this is just a surge protector and EMI RFI filter. It's not a voltage regulator. It's not a battery backup. But it does provide surge protection. Again, that 300-volt let-through at max. But the reason I go with the P8V and not the P4V that I mentioned before, which is even smaller and just plugs into the wall, is because the P8V is the lowest price model they offer that lets through the full 15 amps. The other ones clamp you down at 12. So this is $45 from B&H. And it's got actually a pretty nice design in that, because I think one of the things you want to do is sort of hide this. Now, it's slim and kind of long. I just have mine sort of sitting alongside the base of my cylinder sub, but it also has just 4-way keyhole mounts. You could actually just hang it on the wall, like sort of like if you've got your cylinder almost like corner loaded, this could just be like on the wall in behind the cylinder upright where you would never see it. So,
yeah, what you would want to do in that case is make sure that the screws that you're using for the keyhole are just out enough.
Yeah.
Or you're going to put some sort of rubber or something between the
or just
thing and the wall. Yeah, felt, whatever. All right, Ben on Twitter. Ben says, what are some quality in-wall speaker choices? What do we think of the RBH Visage series? I don't know the Visage series on off the top of my head, but RBH is pretty honest about their speakers. If they cost more, it's because they're better. If they cost less, it's because they had to cut some corners. And generally speaking, the corners are extension. They don't sacrifice flat frequency response. They'll sacrifice extension or aesthetics or
maximum
like
output level.
Or maximum output level, exactly.
Yeah.
So if the Visage series is cheap, well then that's why. And if it's expensive, then they're real good.
I mean, basically RBH has consolidated their in-wall series now. So they used to have sort of their entry-level series, which were like a A616 and things like that. They now have everything that used to be there just under the Visage VA series. And those are the least expensive ones. They sort of just got rid of the ones that used to have the non-magnetic grills. The Visage series used to be the ones that started the magnetic grills. Well, now everything just has magnetic grills. Yeah. So it's the VA series is the least expensive, and then the VM series uses the upgraded M series drivers, which are drivers that I personally really, really like. It's the same ones they're using in the Impression Elite series now. The Impression Elite series got those M series drivers. So I'm a big, big fan of the VM series for sure. I think those are very high quality in-wall speakers, really good drivers. And one thing that I like about RBH is that they have options for backer boxes and back cans for all of their in-wall and in-ceiling models. There is a way to put a rear enclosure on everything, including retrofit. So I like that very much. I am quite a big fan of RBH's Visage series, especially the VM series with those upgraded M series drivers.
Yeah, and if you're not looking there, you can always look at the Pyrion. It's another one that we recommend on the regular. But there's tons of ones that we recommend. So it depends on what you mean by quality, too. Is it quality for price or just quality? Because if you're talking about high-end in-ceiling and in-wall speakers, there's lots of them out there that exist. And some of them are ridiculously expensive.
Well, I mean, there's RBH's own Signature series, which is stepping up things and actually comes with a fully integrated back box. Like it's part of you just buy it that way. It's already got the cabinet
just cut the hole
attached to it. That's right. So within RBH's own lineup, there's something higher. I mean, KEF is going to be one that goes all the way from, they have ones that are just the CI models, then the Q series, the R series, all the way up to their top of the line THX series. And I will wholeheartedly, easily recommend KEF in-walls to anybody. But if you're going for sort of more middle-of-the-road price, like $150 per speaker, a Pyrion, like Tom said, or HSU is one that I also like to recommend sometimes, right in that sort of $150 per speaker's price range. If you need something that's horn-loaded and a bit more efficient, HSU's in-wall speakers are a nice option. And then if you're just like, I want the least expensive but still decent quality, I like Monoprice's new Sycamore series. I think they're a good value. They're about $100 a pair. So definitely not expensive, but pretty nice quality drivers in there. So I think that runs the gamut from very inexpensive in the Monoprice Sycamore through mid-range and then to high-end.
Yeah, I mean, you can even go like Legacy Audio. They have in-wall options as well, and that's good.
And I mean, Paradigm has some wonderful in-walls.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot out there.
Focal too. Focal has a gamut from not crazy expensive to crazy expensive. So yeah.
So he says, does placing sound absorption like Owens Corning 703 on the inside of a sheetrock wall do anything as far as room acoustics go? Would having 3 inches of absorption on the inside of a wall and 4 inches of absorption on the outside of the wall be the same thing as having a 7-inch bass trap on the outside? And the answer is no.
Nope.
So what it does is it's going to make your wall more inert, and it's going to help sound passage through the actual wall. Now, does that mean that it's going to not be able to get around the wall through like an outlet or underneath a door or through the door or whatever? No. So, that's about the only thing that does. Now, I put tons of insulation, not just regular insulation, not Owens Corning 703 or any of that stuff. I put regular insulation all through the wall between my home theater and the main room.
Yeah, this is an interior wall, so you're not doing this for thermal purposes like you are on an exterior wall. This is on the interior walls of Tom's house. He's got insulation in there.
And I did that to try to keep as much sound from passing through as possible.
Yeah, that was a soundproofing measure. Yeah.
Yeah, it does not much of a measure because it goes right under the door and through the door. So, if I'm listening too late at night at near reference volumes, which Tom has been known to do from time to time when he decides he's going to watch Infinity War at midnight on a Friday after a couple of beers, his wife comes in and yells at him. So it's not the same thing as having a 7-inch bass trap. The 4-inch the 4 inches inside the wall or inside the room is trapping. The stuff inside the wall is just for sound acoustic. I mean, yes,
like one of the easiest ways to think, let's say you had a room that literally echoed, right? If you put insulation inside the walls, so it's still a hard surface that you're seeing, you're still going to have an echo. It did nothing as far as the acoustics inside the room. Now, outside of the room, on the other side of that wall, on the room on the other side, it might be a little bit quieter because now any side that penetrated the hard wall and normally would have bounced around inside the wall cavity. Now that's getting absorbed inside the wall cavity, so the sound doesn't pass as easily from room to room. But inside the room where you are, where it's echoing, it's still echoing. You put up 4 inches of insulation within the room, on the outside of the drywall walls. Now you've reduced that echo. And if you put 7 inches, then you're reducing that echo down into the base. But having the inside of the wall treated, that's for helping to prevent sound transmission from room to room, not the echoes.
And if you were just to put like a couple of panels up on your wall and expected that to be soundproofing, it would also not work. Okay, because it's going to go around those panels and through the wall on either side of the panels. I mean, it's just the way that works. So it's the same sort of deal. If you said, "Oh, I want to soundproof my room," I put up, panels on my wall, and would that help? And the answer is no.
Those two things do get confused very often. Sometimes people are like, I want to soundproof. Can I just put up some fluffy stuff within my room? I didn't open up the walls or anything. I just, within my room, I put up some fluffy stuff. Is that going to stop the sound from getting to the room beside me? Nope. And also, if I did open up the walls and put insulation in there and then drywalled back up, is that going to help the echoes inside my room? Nope. It's the same material, insulation, but it's doing 2 different jobs.
That's right. Infinite Gary. One of Gary's neighbors is moving to a new residence where she won't have cable TV service. She has about 150 hours of standard def content saved on her cable DVR, and she would still like to be able to watch those recordings. A cable TV tech suggested using a DVD recorder to move everything off the DVR. Do we have any recommendations? They suggested that? Really? I don't.
Yeah.
That's something that I didn't think they even let you do. I mean, I think they.
Well, I mean, you can't
not
do
only
it.
do they not want you to do it, but I think that you have to have some sort of weird workaround to make it happen because they don't want you doing that. That's the whole idea of HDMI to begin with.
Yeah, well, you can't do it with a digital connection. You can do it with a analog video connection because nothing much can stop a composite video output from going into a VCR and then recording it in real time. So, and I mean, this is all standard def content. So, I mean, that solution would work. You would literally have to record each show in real time, at which point... Haven't you just watched everything that was on the cable DVR? But I guess not, because you could have stuff.
It's how many hours? It's 150 hours? Now, that's going to take a bit.
Gary did mention, it's going to take 150 hours. So I mean, it could be done on a VCR, or it could be done...
But you have to sit there every hour and start it again.
Yeah, well...
I mean, it's not like you can just have it keep going.
You could have it go for 6 hours on an extended long play VHS tape, or you can get about, 4 hours on good quality on a DVD?
Yeah, but if each show was an hour long, you still have to press play on the cable.
Oh, on the DVR,
the cable
right.
box.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So every hour for 150 hours straight, you're gonna, or every half hour.
Yeah.
For 100, depending on which shows you recorded, you're gonna have to do. This is.
So I mean, that'll work. I mean, there is no.
You know what my solution is? Steal the DVR.
Yeah, bring the DVR because I've in Canada we have the instance where So the DVR does need to be plugged into a cable outlet to function at all, but you don't necessarily have to have actual functioning cable subscription for it to just say, I am connected to the wall so I can play back what is already in my memory bank. So you could maybe just give that a try. Just bring your cable DVR along to the new place, plug it in. You don't have any subscription. You don't have any actual service going, but sometimes that just works. So that might be the easiest. But I mean, I don't know. There's no way to just copy the hard drive because the hard drive is all encrypted. So there's no easy way to do that. I mean, you could do it with just a VCR. You could do it with a DVD recorder. Those are a bit harder to find. Interestingly, the easiest place I could still find a DVD recorder at a not insane price was Walmart. Not the Walmart store, but Walmart online. They still sell DVD recorders. So you can give that a try. You would just be recording it onto DVD-Rs. So, I mean, Lee Overstreet, he's like the man when it comes to archiving older SD content, but of course he does it all on computer. So he's using a capture card. It would be pretty simple in this case because you're talking about a standard definition capture card. That could be one of the Hauppauge cards that works very well for capturing standard def, but you'd still be recording it in real time now onto a computer's hard drive. That it's just the recording medium we're talking about. Is it a VHS tape, a DVD-R, or a hard drive? But either way, you're just recording it in real time. But I don't have a better solution than that. Right? You can't just
there isn't.
You can't just copy an encrypted hard drive, which is what's in the DVR itself.
Yeah. The easiest solution is to take the DVR with you and make it work. So, I mean, I don't know how to test that exactly.
Yeah.
If you have different cable surface than she has or something like that, she could bring it to your house or vice versa or whatever and see if if she can plug it into the wall and it'll still play. But that's really the solution. The solution is to keep the DVR box.
Gary did say in a later email that a lot of it was like pretty much the entire run of MASH. And so he's just getting her to buy the box set because that was a lot of it.
Why would anybody need the entire run of MASH?
If that's your favorite show. And now she'll have a box set of it.
I liked Rash. I like MASH. I said Rash.
You did say Rash.
I like MASH just fine. I don't like Rashes that much. So High Def Digest posted an article titled, "Is 4K a Scam?" The answer is yes. They detailed how they get asked every day about real versus fake 4K, since most movies still use 2K resolution digital intermediates, whatever, and still use 2K resolution CGI effects. They go through how Ultra HD Blu-rays and 4K streaming is about a lot more than just the number of pixels. There's HDR and wide color, higher bit rates, and more efficient compression codecs. Often Atmos or DTS:X are only found in the 4K version, and perhaps most importantly, there's usually been a new remastering or even a full restoration done for the 4K release, and it's a lot more involved than just upscaling from 2 to 4K. What's our take on the subject in High Def Digest article? I didn't read the article, but I'll tell you, I agree it is a scam. But the reason I think
they're saying it's not a scam, in fact.
No, but I agree with the people who are saying it's a scam. But the reason it's a scam is because the only reason that they're touting this 4K is because they believe, rightly or wrongly, that people are too stupid to be convinced to buy a new TV by anything other than the higher number of pixels. And that's why they're pushing it. Now, all the rest of the stuff is not a scam. No one needed 4K. No, definitely nobody needs 8K. But no one needed 4K. I have the amount of people that sit so close to their screens that they were seeing pixels in high def. It's minuscule. Is absolutely minuscule. And those people, 4K displays were needed maybe in professional settings when people were, medical. They were zooming into something and they're getting really close to the screen trying to see something. Sure, 4K, 8K, 16K, get all the Ks you want over there. That's fine. But what is not a scam is all the rest of it. Now, it is a scam that they're putting Atmos and DTS:X only on 4K discs,
right?
Because that's unnecessary.
Entirely not a technical reason why that should be the case. Because regular 1080p Blu-rays can entirely handle Atmos and DTS:X.
They're just gating that behind there, and that's BS as far as I'm concerned. But the HDR. The HDR is a real thing. It's a real thing that makes real sense for us to care about. But they don't think the public can be convinced to buy a new TV based on having more colors. Even though many a marketing campaign has been built around having more colors. Does everybody remember the yellow pixel for Toshiba or whatever it was?
That was sharp.
That was sharp.
Aquos.
Right. The yellow pixel is going to make all the difference. Right. And so we know that they sometimes will market it around color, but they, for whatever reasons, have decided that HDR is not enough. So they're going with this higher pixel count that 100% of the people, as far as I'm concerned, don't need.
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the article that High Def Digest was basically right on. I agreed fully with essentially everything that was said in there. And I mean, it is a tough marketing thing because, so I mean, I had the instance where somebody I knew was always watching everything on their widescreen TV, their new 16:9 TV. Everything was stretched. Right, because they were still getting standard definition cable service, so everything was coming in 4:3 in their cable box. But of course, the TV stretched it to fill the full screen. And this person that I knew was convinced that is what HD meant. That if it didn't look like that, all weird and wide and distorted, that you weren't watching HD. Like, in their mind, that's what HD meant. And in a lot of people's minds, what 4K means is like they'll see an OLED and they'll be like, is that a 4K TV? And the person will be like, yes, it is, because, yeah, it is. They're not wrong. And now they're convinced that that's what 4K means. And then they'll see something else and they'll be like, oh, that doesn't look as good as the OLED. It must not be 4K. And the person's like, well, it is 4K. And they're like, no, it can't be. because it's not what I have now decided 4K means, right? So, in trying to simplify everything to make it really easy for consumers, it has also caused confusion, which is always the case. That's what always happens. Yeah. But I mean, what they're specifically talking about are the people who are saying, we get this disc, buy this Ultra HD Blu-ray. It looks better. There's no question it looks better. It sounds better because for whatever reason they gated the Atmos release only to this Ultra HD Blu-ray version and not the regular Blu-ray version. But I know, because I went and looked it up on Blu-ray.com, that they actually rendered all the CGI graphics in this movie at 2K resolution, and they used a 2K intermediate. So even though the camera was like 3.5K, because it was one of the red cameras, at some point everything only had 2K number of pixels.
Right.
And therefore, this Ultra HD Blu-ray is fake 4K. Because
these are the same people who are buying high def audio at 96 kilohertz. These
or
are the
192
same
or 384
people who are like, oh yeah, I only listen to higher res audio because it's that much better. No, it's not. It's not. They just up converted it. You know the thing you're complaining about with 4K? Mm-hmm. That's your high horse. That's the hill that you're going to die on. Yeah, it's the same thing with your stupid music, so shut up. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think High Def Digest's attempt to clarify this stuff was very good. How many people will actually read and comprehend it, I have no idea. But I'm in full agreement with them, Gary.
I'm just so irritated with 4K just in general, so you have to forgive me.
It's okay. You can just skip straight to 8K, Tom. You can just skip straight to 8K.
That's right. I'm waiting for 32. One thing I will say is, yes, they're right that there's been partial remasters or full remasters, but let's all look at Thor Ragnarok as an example of how that can go horribly wrong. So just because they remastered it doesn't mean it's any better. Sometimes it's worse. So, in general, in the future, I believe that having an Ultra HD 4K disc will mean that you are having a better experience than what you would have had with just a straight Blu-ray because of the better audio, the higher dynamic range, and the remastering. But right now, it's such a new thing that there's not that much of it. I want to say I was at a meeting the other day, and I was talking about home theater, and I said, how many of you know that there's such a thing as a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray? And not a single hand in that room of 30 people went up.
Yeah.
No one knows about it. No one knows what those discs are. No one.
Yeah.
If they're buying them,
it's by
they don't
accident.
know why. Yeah, they have no idea why they're buying it. None at all. All right, Carl. Carl is using Sen CMT 340 speakers up front, some Polk Monitor Series bookshelf speakers as surrounds, and slim Polk OWM3 speakers overhead for Atmos. He'd like to get some different surround speakers that could be mounted on his side walls and stick out as little as possible, ideally less than 4 inches. He'd also like to keep the price around $200 for the pair. He's been eyeing the ELAC Debut 2.0, OW 4.2. Is there anything else that we would recommend more highly? He wants them to be very narrow.
Very narrow from front to back. Mm-hmm. Wall mountable and cheap. Around $200 a pair, and match as close as you can reasonably expect to some Ascend CMT 340 speakers.
So he's been looking at the ELAC.
The ELAC Debut 2.0. This is their on-wall model. And honestly, I think that's a pretty darn good choice there, Carl. They are about $230, but that's not wildly more expensive than what you were looking for. And they check all the boxes. They're just under 4 inches from front to back. Very easy to wall mount. Pretty darn easy to drive. And they're going for a neutral sound. I wouldn't call their tweeter the equal of the CMT 340's tweeter, but
it's a surround.
It's your surrounds. And they're not going for some wild characteristic sound. They're going for a pretty darn neutral, and they just have a little bit of high-end roll-off, which honestly in your surrounds is very unobjectionable.
I really wish RBH still sold those flat on-wall speakers.
But they do not. Well, they have the Ultras. RBH does have the Ultras, but they are
be a lot more
not in this price range.
Yeah. Well, and the other one that immediately came to my mind was those flat KEF speakers.
Yeah, the T
sold.
Series. It'd be like the T101.
Those are super more expensive than this.
Well, not crazy more, but they're about $250 each. So about $500 for the pair. So well more than what you're looking for. They are super flat, and they'd be an all right choice, but not for this price. I mean, naturally.
How far away is he sitting from these speakers? Does he say?
He doesn't say. I mean, naturally, I was thinking Ascen's own HTM 200s, because, of course, those will match timbre-wise perfectly to your CMT 340s, but they're about 6 inches from front to back, so they're a little bit deeper than he was hoping for.
What about the NHTs? NHTs.
Oh, the
NHTs
Super Zeros.
should be... Yeah, the Super Zeros. They're going to be a little bit more than $200 a pair, but not more than $230, I don't think.
Yeah, they're $250. $250, because they're $125 each.
Okay, and those would be smaller.
Yep.
Yeah, than any of this, really.
Yep.
And those would be a good match.
There's also AVRant's little Intimus 4B satellites. Those could be another one. Again, they're about 5 inches deep, but they're the least expensive out of all of these. They're only $170 for a pair of those.
What about the RBHs, the satellites?
Do they don't have those anymore.
Ah, you got
all of RBH's little stuff is gone. It's all gone. So, I mean, the Ascend Acoustics, the HTM 200s, they're $300 for a pair. So they're definitely over the budget you were hoping for and a little deeper, but they would have the perfect timbre match. The NHT Super Zeros, very close in price to the ones that you're already looking at. The size is about right. AVRant's Intimus, that could also work. But do I have a reason to strongly point you away from the ELAC debut on-wall 4.2s? Really, I don't. They check all the boxes and would be a very reasonable solution as your surround speakers mounted on a wall. Yeah.
All right, Casey. Casey has plugged his Roku Ultra into his Denon S510BT receiver and then connected his Denon via HDMI to his Vizio E65 TV. If the Roku Ultra is set to output 1080p or 4K resolution, everything works fine. But as soon as he tries to set the Roku Ultra to output HDR, the screen goes black, and he has to reset the Roku Ultra to get it working again. At which point it defaults to outputting 1080p. His Vizio TV says it supports HDR10, and the Denon S510BT says it supports HDMI 2.0 with HDR and HDCP 2.2. So what's the problem? There's just some setting he needs to change. Is this a bandwidth issue? It can't be.
Well, it could possibly be because I want to check the easy stuff first. Because sometimes, Lord knows, it's very easy to overlook some of this stuff. On the back of the Denon S510BT, you might notice that it separated its 5 HDMI inputs into 2 little sections, and only 3 out of the 5 HDMI inputs are actually the 4K HDCP 2.2 inputs. The first...
And the thing that they've done, unfortunately, is that they've made that input 3, 4, and 5.
3, 4, and 5. And the one labeled media player is input number 2.
Blu-ray.
Or Blu-ray is labeled input number 2 and number 1 for Blu-ray. And those are not the 4K HDCP 2.2 input. So maybe he already checked that. But Lord knows it would be easy to plug your Roku Ultra into the output labeled media player or the input labeled media player.
Honestly, who decided that the last 3 were going to be the 4K ones? That is
right.
So wrong on so many levels, but that's engineers for
so
you.
I want
so that you guys understand what we're talking about here. This is a more entry level Denon. I don't know if it's the exact entry level.
I mean, it's pretty much their entry level as far as surround sound receivers go.
And it's got, so much so that it's got like the spring-loaded.
Yeah. Spring-loaded speaker clips, and only 5 of them. This is a 5. And interestingly, it has 2 subwoofer pre-outs, although, of course, that's just an internal Y splitter, but it does have
Y
2.
splitter on the inside, but the thing is when we're dealing with a more entry-level receiver, one of the things that you do have to worry about is that they're going to be a lot more limited in their functionality, but it doesn't mean that they don't have it. It just means that it's not always readily apparent how to make it work. So it'll say, hey, we can do all these things. And you're like, great, it does all these things. I plug it in. It's not doing the thing. It says it does the thing. Well, this could very well be the case that...
and of course, if you're doing the thing that I do, which is like leaning over my equipment rack and looking at it upside down and backwards, man, nobody would blame you.
I'm blindly trying to put the HDMI in.
It's like, I found an open HDMI port. There you go. Yeah. Unfortunately, you got to make sure it's one of those 3. So that's the first thing to check. Now, also, there is a setting on your Vizio that is certainly worth checking because only HDMI input 1 can handle 4K at 60 hertz at 422 or 444 chroma, which is what is most likely being sent out of your Roku Ultra when it goes into HDR mode. So you have to make sure that your Denon's output is plugged into HDMI input number 1 on your Vizio, and then you do need to go into the display settings, and under display settings, you want to go to the input section, and it is only available for HDMI 1 within the Vizio's menu, but in that input section, you have to turn on HDMI chroma subsampling. I don't know why that's the name, but it has to be activated, and by default, it is not activated, and it has to be in order for HDR to work, and it will only work on input 1.
Fixes this problem.
Something we've mentioned will fix this problem. I'm quite sure of it.
Yeah.
So along these...
Which is amazing that this entry-level receiver can really do all these things. The fact that it makes it a little bit more difficult is part of the why you pay less.
Unfortunately, not plug and play. But along these lines, I'm not going to mention his name because he was a little bit embarrassed by it. But this, again, an example of we have all been there, and it's easy to do. I had someone email me, and instead of making this a full question, I'll throw this in here. He just got a new monoprice monolith amplifier, was very excited. And he's like, I have just spent the last 3 hours of my life connecting this to my Denon and Marantz. It was one of the popular brands, AV receivers, and nothing. I'm getting no sounds, no test tones, no pink noise. Nothing is coming out of this thing. And I was like, well, before we go down any rabbit holes, on the back of that monolith, there are these little teeny switches beneath the inputs that switch between the XLR and the RCA input.
They are so easy to miss.
Oh, Lord, are they? Especially if you're looking at it upside down and backwards, right? Because they're below the inputs, right? They'd be visually hidden if you were looking at it upside down. So I'm like, make sure all of those are clicked over to RCA. And he wrote back, he's like, it was the stupid XLR to RCA switches. And more than that,
don't ever speak to me of these switches again. They are dead to me.
He had downloaded the manual, but the manual that they have online is for the old model that didn't have XLR inputs. So it didn't mention that there was this little switch to even look for. So... I mean, please, nobody ever feel embarrassed about any of this stuff, because Tom and I have most certainly plugged something into the wrong plug, overlooked a little switch, overlooked that one of these ports does the thing we want and the other 7 don't. I mean, we've all been there.
How many times have I told the story about how my one speaker is wired out of the face for frickin' ever?
Didn't even notice.
And not only did I not catch it, but I've had other AV professionals in here going, the imaging's not exactly right. I think we should play with placement. We played with placement for like an hour. Like, I think it's better.
You just had to switch the black and the red wires. Yes.
And it wasn't until, Odyssey said, hey, by the way, your stupid speaker's out of phase.
Yeah. I do like checklists. Checklists sometimes get you to check.
My favorite thing to do is when you have a picture of the back of the receiver on your phone, and you're counting the RCA connections over so that you can get to the subwoofer, so you can plug the subwoofer one in there, because you can't see it, you can't read it, and you can't see the color. You have no idea which one is which, so you're counting over upside down and backwards.
I remember on my old Kenwood AV receiver that everything had the labels on the back. The writing for what that input was above the plug, right? That's how all of them were, except for one thing, which I think was like the component video output or something like that, where the writing was beside it, which meant it was also above some other plugs, right? I'm like, oh God, why would you? You know what I mean? It can be pretty easy to get confused. Good times.
All right. So, Ben is back after we discussed his plans for his 12 by 16 by 8 dedicated theater room. Boy, those dimensions all sort of work together to create all sorts of fun room interactions.
Yeah, only the 16 and the 8, really. The 12
is the 12 is still a...
It's a 2/3 thing going on.
We convinced him to go with a wide projection screen and a more compact SB2000 subs, and to consider some different speakers. He made more detailed drawings for himself and realized he doesn't have as much space as he expected, which is why you didn't go with the PB2000 that you were talking about. So now he's thinking he would prefer to mount his projection screen directly on his front wall rather than making any sort of false wall. So that means rethinking his front speaker plans. He could, of course, use regular speakers to the right and left of the screen rather than having them behind an acoustically transparent screen. And he could have a horizontal center either above or below the screen. He but he really likes the idea of having at least the center behind the screen so they can be vertical in the same height as the left, right, and speakers. In his case, he isn't concerned at all about sound leaking into adjacent rooms, so cutting a hole in his front wall and using an in-wall center or even all three front speakers being in-walls isn't a problem as far as soundproofing goes, but we don't seem to be fans of in-walls. It's not... Yeah, I guess it's
you definitely made a comment last week that could be interpreted as we are not fans of in-wall speakers, and given our druthers, we will avoid in-wall speakers. Yes, that is the case.
Yes, that is the case. They are a compromise.
Yes,
in my book. Yeah. So what do we think you should do? Would something like the RBH Visage VM series in walls that offer swivel tweeters be a good option? Well, Rob hates swivel tweeters.
I do hate a swivel tweeter unless the woofers and the entire front face of the whole thing also swivel along with it. The idea of independently moving the tweeter from the rest of the speaker makes no sense to me. I know customers want it, and that's why they do it, but I don't like that at all. Creates all kinds of lobing problems.
All right, so the fact that you're able and willing to cut holes in your wall is great, okay? And yes, that means that you can use in-wall speakers all over the place. But where are your bays in your walls? Where's the framing? Because what you need to do is go across the front wall of your room and say, this is where I want the speakers to be, and then see if there is a 2x4 behind that, in which case that is not where the speaker can be. Okay, unless this is an interior, even if this is an interior wall or whatever, you don't want to be cutting 2x4s out, uprights out of your wall so you can put speakers there. So the problem I have with in-wall speakers is twofold. One, placing them is dictated by what's inside the wall, which means that you can't always have them where you want them to be. And two, once you get them there, if it ends up being that they need to be aimed or, towed in or changed or whatever, you're stuck. You can't do that. So you're at the point now where you've already got a hole in your wall and you're kind of hosed on this. That's me. If you are dead set on getting in-wall speakers, more power to you, dude. Knock yourself out. I don't really care. It will help you pick some good ones, and the ones you've chosen would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I could say, I could quite easily get on board with only your center is the in-wall. It's the only speaker that is behind your screen, because you don't need to tow a center, right? The center is going to be firing straight out.
Straightforward.
So let's say he goes with a RBH Visage VM series in-wall center. I would be A-okay with that. And to the left and the right of the screen are Impression Elite series RBH speakers that use the same M series drivers, and those you can now position and tow in because they're regular speakers to the left and right of your screen. That I would give a thumbs up to, because I don't really see any problem with that. And if that's what you're going for, I say A-okay. I would also mention as an idea, just to throw it out there, I mean, I believe initially he was thinking about like a 2-foot deep false wall, as is normally the case. He was going for regular speakers that, in his case, were sealed. Looking at the Outlaw ones is what he was looking at. And we were saying, maybe the NHT is also a sealed design, but he was looking at like a 1.5 to 2 foot deep false wall. Well, instead of that, you could go with what is essentially a slim sort of wall mountable speaker like, say, Ascend's HTM 200s, or even upmarket, their Sierra Lunas. You've got a small room. You don't need crazy output levels, right? 12 by 16. The Lunas or the HTM 200s would have well more than enough output. Those are about 6 inches deep. And then, even if you are going to have the left and the rights behind the screen, you could have, say, a 8-inch deep false wall, which now you can have that whole thing nicely filled with insulation, almost a semi-baffle wall going on. You've got these speakers that are only about 6 inches deep within that, 8-inch deep framing. And so without taking up very much space at all, you've still done the whole false wall thing without any holes in your walls or whatever. So those would be my two solutions to you. One of those two at this point.
Yeah. I mean...
Or would you even just go a regular center below the screen? Don't worry about any of this.
I could go either way. I mean, again, you have to go and look what's inside your walls before you can make any of these determinations. Because if you're like, I want the center to be behind this, in the center of the screen, behind the screen. Okay, well, where's the center of the screen?
Yeah.
Is there? Can you even do what you're asking?
Are the joists set up to accommodate that?
If they're not, well, then you're there. This is all a moot point. get your stud finder, figure out where things are, and then say, hey, there's a bay, my center speaker will be offset by this much because of the bay. If I use this speaker, if I use this other speaker, it'll be here. What should I do? And then we'll say what we'll say. But it's just so much easier to go with the speaker underneath. And honestly, your brain, it has no problems taking that speaker that's underneath that screen and having it.
That is what Tom himself is using. I'm using a flat panel. My gigantic center, which is practically bigger than my TV. No, that's really not true. But my gigantic center is sitting below my flat panel. So we're both making do.
Yeah. But if it's an aesthetic thing, I completely understand. But this is not a discussion. This is all hypothetical until you measure what's inside your wall. All right, so he says, Gene from Audioholics recently posted a YouTube video about how to place multiple subwoofers. He links to some existing articles on Audioholics. In both the video and one of the articles, he mentions putting 2 subs, both in the front wall, but a quarter of the room's width from each side wall. In fact, in the article, he lists that placement as very good, while listing diagonally opposite corner placements for 2 subs as only as good. And he also says he had excellent success with the 1/4 width placement while running 2 subs in a stereo configuration. Some of these articles got to be old, but whatever. With his and one other thing about Gene, his room is a humongous L.
And he's using
not a little L.
Bizarre speakers that nobody else in the world has.
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff going on with Gene's room that does not apply to your room. I have been in Gene's room, and believe me, your room is not Gene's room. So he says, with more detailed drawings, Ben figures he could position 2 subs either using diagonally opposite corners or this 1/4 width placement for both subs on the front wall. Do not do that. And if he could do the front wall placement, he was thinking he might build a wood enclosure up front that would house his gear and the 2 subs. With putting the SB2000s within that enclosure with some speaker grill cloth in front to mess up their performance in any way. What are our thoughts overall? Overall, I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah, don't do that. So, do the 2 diagonally opposite corners that you said are a possibility. Do that. Do the diagonally opposite corners.
I guarantee you some of the things that Gene's talking about are specific for his room and old. Those are the 2 things, because Gene's got $80,000 speakers that have 6 subs, I believe.
Yeah, 3 forward firing, 3 back firing each.
Backwards firing subs in each of his main speakers. And then he has 3 or 4 extra subs going around his room as well.
Yeah, he's got 5 subs total. Yeah.
You are not Gene.
He also has 5 subs total because there was one seat he could never get working. I'm like, well, Gene, if you stopped using stereo subs up front, you wouldn't need the 5th sub. But no, he is set on doing it that way. So,
well, and then his room has also been completely treated by
Oralex.
Oralex, that's right. So all the walls are, there's framing inside the room, and they have all sorts of stuff behind there. I don't even know all the stuff that's behind there.
And his riser is a stupid resonator.
Right. His riser is so his room is one of the deadest rooms I've been in. I mean, it is.
Except he's making himself problems with that resonating riser on top of everything else. So
I don't.
There are issues in Gene's room on top of things.
But so he's talking about his, to a certain extent, his personal experience and what he's decided to do. But we are telling you from the math, from Harman, from Dr. Toole, all the stuff says in your room, which is a rectangle and not a humongously overtreated L, put your subs in opposite corners. Don't stick them in an enclosure. Don't ever stick them in an enclosure unless that enclosure is literally a wireframe, and that's it. Which is not.
I mean, with the sealed subs, if they're firing out the front of the thing, that wouldn't be the end of the world. You'd be okay if you're going for the SB2000s. That's not the concern, but you wouldn't be building it all the way to the corner, so it's all moot. Do the diagonally opposite corners, but we'll have a link at avrant.com in the show notes for this episode to the Harman multiple subwoofer white paper by Sean Olive and Todd Welty. And in particular, scroll down towards the bottom and pay attention to the real world stuff that they do. Because if you only pay attention to the theoretical at the top, you're going to go, oh, diagonally opposite corners don't look that great. But when you get into the real world measurement, they're like, oh, actually, they perform a lot better in diagonally opposite corners. So theoretically, diagonally opposite corners are second best to having... So the best is 4, either in the 4 corners or the midpoints of each of the walls. I guess so. Diagonally opposite corners is third best. Second best would be 2 subs, midpoints of each wall. midpoints of the two sidewalls or midpoints of front and back, then third best is diagonally opposite corners. Theoretically, that's the case. And then in the real world measurements, it was like, oh, the diagonally opposite corners worked even better than the theoretical predicted that they would. So, and what didn't work was both of them at the front of the room in any configuration. That doesn't work real world or non-real world. If you have 3 other subs or 4 other subs or at least 2 other subs at the back of your room, yeah, then 2 at the front, 2 at the back works. But no, don't put them both at the front.
Yeah. Nick says he put his speaker system together about 10 years ago on a pretty tight budget. He wound up with Polk Monitor series speakers and a BIC F12 subwoofer, all powered by a Pioneer receiver. Sounds like a pretty decent first system there. He upgraded to a Denner receiver last year and added a pair of Polk OWM3 overheads for a 5.1.2 configuration. He thinks his Polk speakers sound better now, less harsh than before. That was likely due to Odyssey, right? Could be.
Could be.
Maybe.
It could be just like it can be the case when you have inadequate amplifier power, because I'm assuming it was an entry-level Pioneer receiver and not a higher-end one.
If it was, if he was on the budget.
That it could have been getting into some soft clipping there before. That can definitely create the harshness if you were playing things loud, but it could be Odyssey.
Yeah. He doesn't tell us the size of his room, so it could be. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on there. So now he's considering a speaker upgrade, upgrading to dual subwoofers and going for a full 7.2.4 configuration, but doesn't have the budget to get 11 new speakers and 2 new subs all at once. His front runners are new speakers are the SVS Ultra series. So would it make sense to only upgrade his front 3 speakers for the time being? That way he could use his existing Polk speakers as surrounds and surround backs, and then instead of spending money on new surrounds and backs right now, he'd put his remaining funds towards the subwoofer budget. Does that sound reasonable, or would we say he needs to upgrade his surrounds at the same time as his fronts? It sounds completely reasonable. I would totally do that.
I think your plan is right. I do think, it definitely makes sense to start with your front speakers. That is where the bulk of all the content is coming from that you're listening to. You will notice a difference in music and dialogue intelligibility and all that lovely stuff. And then second thing you got to do after those front 3 is subwoofers. So I am in full agreement with this order of operation.
And I think this gives you a chance to experience 7 points.
That's true.
And decide whether or not the 2 speakers in the back actually make a difference for you.
Yeah.
Because I think in this case, in many cases, the surround backs are not all that important. They end up being kind of immaterial for most people. So it may not be the case for you, but you may find, hey, I was going to upgrade to a 7.1.4 or 7.2.4. I've tried 7 points, whatever you've got, and I don't think the 7 is all that much of an improvement over 5. So I'm just going to go with 5 and save the money.
Could be.
So there you go.
Yep.
So the budget won't cover 2 upgraded subs right away. Does it make sense to upgrade his BIC with just 1 SVS sub for the time being? So we still don't know the size of the room.
We don't know the size of the room. I mean, we do know that essentially any of SVS's subs is going to outperform the BIC F12. They're going to get you right down to 20 hertz, which the F12, which I like the F12 as an entry-level sub. Too. It's a nice... not very expensive sub. It is not a bad choice in any means. I'm sure you did some research. You didn't land on that accidentally, and that was a darn good entry level. Any of the SVSs will outperform it. They will play louder and lower. So, I mean, given that the plan is to eventually have the dual subs, is it worth starting with one and adding the second one later? Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Especially since SVS is going to usually, and I don't want to say they do this all the time, even though, to my knowledge, they've never not done it. If you call them and say, I already ordered one, I want to order the second one, can I get the discounted pricing, which is like $100 off on this, on buying 2, they're going to give it to you.
Certainly within a year, they will.
Yeah. I really don't see the downside of doing it this way. I would not pair my F12 with this thing. I mean, you can
give it if you want to try like my 12-step process to setting up dual subs, like just for the experiment of doing that to see how that works. Yeah, sure, knock yourself out, because why not?
Well, I mean, if you can place them across the room from each other or whatever, and you're going to be wiring for it anyways, and you're like, well, I've wired for it. There's a wire sitting there, and I have this extra sub that's not doing anything. I can plug it in, and I mean, it's not going to necessarily hurt anything, but
you can have some good times experimenting, and so far, I think your plan is A-okay.
Yeah. So you're thinking he'd just get a second pair of Polk OWM3 speakers for Atmos since they're so affordable at $100 a pair. He could potentially upgrade his 4 Atmos speakers sometime in the future, but this would allow him to have a full 7.2.4 configuration almost right away. Excuse me. So is that a good plan, or should his Atmos speakers be higher end models right away? No, it's good.
For Atmos, yeah, I'm fine. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of these speakers, full stop. But for Atmos purposes, they're inexpensive. They're super easy to mount. They're easy to drive. And when all they're being used for is your Atmos overheads, yeah, that's great. And you know what? A lot of people like these little Polk OWM speakers. And if you want to sell them later,
like 3 people have mentioned them already.
Yeah,
so
you'll have no problems, and you'll probably get back almost all the money you spent on them. So, yeah,
I got, especially for Atmos speakers, I've got so few qualms about what you use. You know
as long as they're not like the worst things ever, they can pretty much do the job. Yeah,
right. That's it. It's very. These are fine. These will be fine. All right, Patrick. Patrick says the LG B9 OLED TVs are available now, and they cost a bit less than the C9 series. Mm-hmm. It has been made clear that the B9 series uses a slightly less powerful Alpha 7 Gen 2 processor, while all the other OLED models from LG use the Alpha 9 Gen 2.
That's right. It's a bigger number.
It's a bigger number. Must be better, just like 4K. But the B9 series still appears to offer full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 inputs along with variable refresh rate and seemingly all the same features. So what are the differences between the B9 and C9? Any big reason not to save a couple $100 by going with the B9? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, there's the obvious cosmetic differences on the outside, okay? It has a different stand. It has there's more plastic on the back than on the C9 and above. All right, so there's the obvious cosmetic differences if none of those things matter to you. It's the same panel. All right, so the OLED panel itself is the same. You'll notice like Ratings just did their review, and their particular B9 unit happened to be a little bit dimmer in peak brightness than their C9 unit, but it's well within what you could get a C9 that is dimmer than a given B9, right? So that's just panel variance. That's not something you can apply to the model specific. So what are the actual... They're even smaller this year than they were between the B8 and the C8, because in the B8 and the C8, you had differences where the C8 had the smooth gradation feature, which was hidden within the MPEG noise menu, and the B8 didn't have that. That was to smooth out any color contouring or color banding. And then also the B8 could not take 4K 60, or what was it? Could not take 1080p 120 with HDR. It could do 1080p 120 without HDR, or it could, of course, do anything with HDR, but not at 120, whereas the C8 could take 120, 1080p at 120 with HDR. Okay, so those were differences back then. This year, none of that applies. Both of them have a separate smooth gradation menu. The B9 and the C9 both have that, and both of them can take 1080p at 120 with HDR. In fact, both of them can take 4K at 120 with HDR. They do have full bandwidth HDMI 2.1. So what the heck are the differences? Why would you ever pay even a couple $100 more? It's if you want professional calibration, because the B9 cannot use Calman's AutoCal, while the C9 and above can. So I don't know.
And neither one probably needs it anyway.
Well, in fact, professional calibrators recommend not using it because it ends up resulting in some color banding that doesn't need to be there when you use the AutoCal, because it does some kind of weird things with some of the color settings. More than that, though, if you are going to have a professional calibrator come in, the C9 and above can do LG's brand new do it in the service menu, manually change the HDR tone mapping. And you can't do that in the B9, all right? And actually, if you're looking at Vincent Teo's recent HD TV test run panel shootout that he did over in the UK, where the C9, to everyone's surprise, won as the best TV, because everyone's like, oh, the Sony's going to win because it won the Value Electronics one. And some people are like, no, the Panasonic's going to win because Value Electronics didn't test the Panasonic, and Panasonic is claiming they have all the best processing technology. Well, here the C9 won. And they're like, how did that happen? And Vincent's like, well, it's the only one that lets us manually tweak it to essential perfection when it comes to HDR. Right. And it works. It works. But the B9 doesn't have that. So it's basically the calibration capabilities. Now, if you look at what Ratings did, which is like a user level menu calibration, The B9 is like perfect. It's like the delta errors in the color and the grayscale were like 0.14, it's like essentially perfect. So unless you want a really in-depth professional calibration, or you are dead set on buying the CalMan software and using AutoCal yourself, performance-wise, there's basically no reason to avoid the B9.
There you go. Enjoy your B9 when you buy it. All right, Francis on Facebook. We previously talked about Francis's setup with his B&W M1 satellite speakers that he would like to upgrade. Based on his previous question, we limited ourselves to physically small speakers, with Rob suggesting the Focal SIB speakers or possibly the Klipsch Theater Pack. And Francis wanted something that won't compress at Francis wanted something that won't compress at higher volumes. And he wants better dialogue intelligibility. And I believe it was a big room. He was sitting far away, right?
I mean, it's not a huge room, but we were eyeballing it. It looked like he was about 13 feet away.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to recommend bookshelf speakers, and now Francis is open to that idea. So what bookshelf speakers would we recommend for him? Well, if you are sitting kind of far away, then you want bookshelf speakers. I mean, the RBH, especially the Elite.
Yeah, the Impression Elite, if you can afford them.
If you can afford them, would be my probably go-to here. This gives you a lot of output. Let's put it this way. You get these speakers and you say, I can't understand what's being said, it ain't the speakers.
It's not the speakers. Yeah, we can be very sure of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can do away with that. So that would be a go-to. You could depending. I don't know how big you want to go as far as bookshelf
and
speakers.
Price.
I mean, there's the price. So there's the SVS, Prime and Ultra speakers.
Yeah.
If you really want high output, the HSUs, the HB1 V2s or whatever they're called, those would be an ugly option, but an option nonetheless.
They could come in that sort of rosewood wood finish on the HSUs, so they don't have to be that ugly.
I think horns look ugly.
You put the grills on.
Yeah.
Yes, those are all good. I would throw Ascend in there as well. I kind of like how if you go the RBH regular impression series, and then a step up in price from those would be Ascend's SE series, like the CBM 170 and the CMT 340 and the HTM 200. And then a step in price above that is the Elite Impression Elite series from RBH. And I think the performance and price tracks very nicely across those. Yeah. I think the Ascend SE are a nice little step above the regular Impression series, and the Impression Elite are a nice little step above the Ascend series. But the prices are commiserate with that. But yeah, the HSU and the SVS would be good options there too. And believe me, there are a lot of options where we would go, yeah, we're very okay with. I mean, we could go, Paradigm, KEF, PSB, we could go on and on and on, right? But
there's a bunch of more speakers that Ascend offers.
Sure.
That you get the Varus Grands and everything else
Aperion.
that they have over there.
Aperion too.
Aperion, sorry.
But the reason that Tom always recommends RBH, I always recommend Ascend, and it's for the very same reason, which is that you get one of those speakers, and we can be quite certain, having recommended those to you, that if something still doesn't sound right, it's not the speaker's fault, and that's why we feel so comfortable recommending those two in particular.
Right, but there's tons of other ones out there that would be just fine. We know that we know from experience that dollar's performance is very good with these speakers. And I mean, the SVS, the HSU, the Ascend, the Aperion, RBHs, a lot of times KEF, depending on where you get them from, are all very good value for performance. So then when you start looking, to me, you look at the size to see if the size works for you. You look at the shape to see if the shape works for you. Look at the aesthetics. Look at all the other stuff. And if you come to me and say, I got this one because it's on your list, but I think it's prettier than the other ones. Hey, knock yourself out, man.
Absolutely.
That's great. And that's a perfectly valid reason to choose one of these speakers. So, when you start going through these things, take a look at them, take a look at their size and all that. So he wants speaker stands that can physically attach to the speakers in some way so they can't be knocked off. What do we recommend? Well, I mean, unless you bolt the stands to the ground, I mean, they can still be knocked off. That's just because the whole stand's coming down with it. But there's the side clamping ones. As
far as stands go, I had trouble finding really good side clamping stands. Wall mounts is easy, but stands a little bit less. I always recommend Sanus as a starting point because excellent quality stands without being crazy expensive. I would recommend to you the Steel series, which are a little bit more expensive, but you want something that's like super not knockoverable. And the Steel series, you can fill the columns with sand or lead shot, or I like kitty litter inside of plastic bags. Don't fill it all the way to the top. Fill like the lower half. That keeps everything, the center of gravity, nice down and low, but it really mass loads it. Makes it easy. Now, if you go for the Steel Series Sanus, you're looking at about $160 for a pair of those. If you'd like something that's very similar but a little bit less expensive, Monoprice has monolith speaker stands now that go for, depending on the height, because they have everywhere between 22 and 32 inches, between $55 to $70 each. So no matter what, even the tallest ones are less expensive than Sanus' Steel series. Now, these have 4 columns, all of which can be filled with sand or lead shot or kitty litter inside.
But they don't have clamps at the top.
But they don't have clamps at the top, and I want to address that because blue tack or museum putty.
Yeah. Right.
Right, you go down to Home Depot, you grab some blue tack or museum putty. First of all, that actually gives you a little bit of damping between the bottom of the speaker and the top of the speaker stand, which I like. You know, if any vibration from that speaker is now not making its way into the stand and resonating anything. But also, blue tack or museum putty, I mean, a force you have to exert to actually knock the speaker off the stand when you're using museum putty, like, good luck. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he's worried about. If he's worried about cats, maybe he's
kids.
got Great Danes.
He's worried about his kids.
Yeah. Again, I've had speakers on stands for my entire life in there, and I've never had a kid.
He says his 6 and 8-year-old crash into stuff, and stuff goes flying. So, but no, I mean, if you really museum putty, actual museum putty, that stuff ain't moving.
All right. Let's do one more. Monty says, thanks for discussing how we think he should lay out the room above his garage that he'll be using as a dedicated movie and video game space. He says the return air duct on the right wall, where we said he should put his screen, is indeed close to the floor, so there shouldn't be any restriction on potential screen size. All right, and there's a drawing here, and there's whatever. I kind of remember this. All right,
so he's got
this is one with the built-in.
Yeah, he's got a window and some built-in bookcases on one side, and I mean, de facto, because the entrance you're walking in and the first thing you see is that window, he's like considering that sort of the front of the room. But we're like, there's no reason why you shouldn't use this nice blank wall on what is the right side in the diagram. You put your screen or flat panel there, you got your skylights at what is now the back of your room, doors on the right, window and stuff to the left. That's how we said to set it up.
Is this a 7? So the way that we have this thing set up, it would be 17 feet 4 inches deep. 19 feet wide.
Correct.
And then however many feet.
About
tall,
9 feet tall on the parts of the ceiling that aren't, sloped.
All right. So he would like to have 2 couches for seating. He'd be okay with them being having them as 2 rows, if that would be best. But what would be the optimal seating arrangement? He recalls us saying not to have any seats pushed right up against the walls and not to have any seats smack dab in the middle of the room. But is a third of the way but is 1/3 of the way into the room the absolute best place, enough so that he should design everything else around having his main seat 1/3 of the way into the room, or could something else work just as well? Well, okay, so we're talking 17 feet, right? Having 2 rows of seats in here is definitely possible.
It is.
The back row is going to be close to that back wall.
Yeah, but it's probably not your primary row, so that's okay.
Yeah. So I have technically 2 rows of seats in this room. Okay, that the back row of seats mostly houses blankets that my family uses, even though we're in Florida and it's always freaking hot and it's always hot here. For some reason, they always have to have blankets on their feet. So that back row is on the back wall. It does it's a couple inches off the back wall. It does very little other than house that. So if that's what your back row seat's going to do, then that's the way that I would do
I mean,
this.
I could see having your back couch about a foot off of that back wall where the skylights are. And then you have your front row about 6 feet in front of that. And that means you're about 10 feet from that nice blank wall up front. And I think that works out really nicely.
Yeah. I skipped the question. So that's the way I would do it. But it depends on how much that back row is really going to be used. But even then, the back row is always going to be sort of add on
Sure.
the +1 of the theater. So,
but I mean, the whole
whatever.
1/3 thing, I mean, that's an easy rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be exactly 1/3. You know, it could be 5/7. It could be 3/5. You know, but what we want to avoid is we do want to avoid smack in the middle. And we want to be, you know, some distance in front or behind of that. But I mean, if you've got essentially 17 and a half feet from front to back with the room oriented the way we say, if you're 10 feet from that front wall, you're definitely behind the midway point and you're good.
Yeah. So what do we think? Should this room use a flat panel or a projector? If you go back to a model year or two, the 77-inch OLEDs can now be had for $3,500 to $4,000. Is that too small? Well, again, here we run into sort of, cart leading the horse sort of thing. You know, if you're worried about having, 2 rows of seats and, you can decide to do it the way that we said, in which case you'd be 10 feet from that front wall. We're probably going to point you towards a projector. Yep. I mean, that's just 10 feet away.
For that back row, a projector is certainly going to look nicer. You know, if you care at all about the back row, you know, if they're sitting essentially 16 feet away from a 77-inch, that's going to look very small for the back row.
But if you came to us and said, I want HDR, I want Dolby Vision, I want, high dynamic range, I want, the special, variable refresh rate and everything for gaming, because gaming is super important to me, we may be pointing you towards a flat panel, in which case we now move your front row in front of the midpoint of the room.
Could.
And your back row could be at, kind of where we're talking about your front row being right now. In which case you can now have a small, a smaller screen, which would be big, but be smaller than this. So then you might be sitting 7 feet or 6 feet away.
But also, if you're using a flat panel, it doesn't have to be flush mounted to the wall. You can go ahead and use a TV stand or one of those 3-in-1 stands that makes it still look like the TV is nice and floating, but it's actually on a stand. Because say 9 feet away from an 85-inch QLED, which, I mean, a QLED would be a fantastic choice for gaming, and we know gaming is a priority to him. And you can get like an 85-inch QLED and sit 9 feet away from it. The seat is still 10 feet from the front wall, but now the TV is just a foot in front of the wall because it's on a normal TV stand, and that's not going to look weird at all, and that could work. So there's not a reason why you must avoid a flat panel in here just because it's always going to be too small. An 85-inch these days is remarkably affordable, so that could be done. But given everything, if you are going to have the 2 rows of seats, you certainly have the space. We know that a projection screen can go there without the HVAC duct being any sort of problem. I'm leaning projector myself.
Yeah, to me, you tell me.
Yeah.
I mean, you tell me what's the most important part for you.
You could do both. You could have a roll-down projection screen for the really big movie experience and have a flat panel behind it.
All right, you could, in which case you can leave your seats where they are. Your roll-down screen suddenly doesn't have to be 110, 120 inches because it's flush on that wall. It's now 92 or 90 inches or whatever the standard is, and it's in front. It rolls down, and it's only for movies.
Yeah.
Then you got your low latency, your variable refresh rate, everything else on your QLED, which is close to the front wall. It's 85 inches, and then this 92-inch screen rolls down in front of it. So you got this big screen experience for movies. Yep. So you could go both.
Naturally, that would be more money, but there you go.
Hey, we're spending it. You just got to make it. So he has a ceiling fan in the middle of his room, and he'd like to keep it. Would that be too much of a problem for installing a projector? What sort of price point do we think he'd be looking at for a projector that can compete with a great flat panel? He's never owned an LCD, always opting for CRT, plasma, or OLED. So will any projector actually live up to its standards?
So this is like a 9-foot ceiling where the fan is. So I think the bottom of that fan is, let's be conservative and say 7.5 feet. Well, because we got an image of it. You can see the image of it.
Do we?
Yeah, the small image there. If you go up.
Yeah, it's pretty flush.
So that's not so far down. So all you have to do is that any of the projectors we're going to suggest, you have to make sure that the lens of the projector can, of course, be below the fan. And then,
or the lights on the bottom.
Yeah, the lights on the bottom of the fan. And then the very top edge of the screen would also need to be at that same level. Just below, because of course you can't, project up past the fan to a screen that's mounted higher and not hit the fan with the light beam. So think of a straight line.
So my problem in my theater is that my projector is above my fan.
Right.
So I have to use lens shift to get it below the fan. So to get it below the fan, I had to take off the lighting
the lights
unit.
that's below it. Right.
Well, the lights are still there, but the housing around it, so they're just raw light bulbs up there right now, which looks terrible, but whatever. And then it projects below that, and I projected it on my wall, and then I moved my screen to where it was.
But you don't have a 9-foot ceiling.
I don't even have an 8-foot ceiling. I have a little bit less than that. So it's very, very tight. And I need to get a shorter fan, but it needs to have a light on it because I don't have any lights in here otherwise. I need to get a shorter fan, but those to get it shorter than the one I have and how high it is right now, they're like specialty fans. They're super expensive.
No, I mean, I'm looking at this room and I'm like, even if you, because there's this sloped part of the ceiling at the front and the back, and I'm like, if the top edge of the screen is where that slope begins, that still looks to be below the lighting part of the fan in his room. So I think you're totally fine. And I mean, you will have lens shift, but we're not talking about like way offsetting it to a side or something like that. You should be able to have the projector lens and the top of the actual projection screen right across from each other, and that'll be fine.
Yes.
So we should just say what would satisfy him. I mean, a JVC would satisfy you.
Well, for sure, yeah.
You know, but I mean, of course, to get like the NX5 now, which is de facto has become their entry level model. That is a $6,000 projector. You can find it for about $5,500. So that's pretty pricey, right? To get one of those JVCs. The Epson 5050 UB is
awfully close.
Darn good projector for $2,700. So that's probably where I'm leaning is an Epson 5050. I think it's a much more reasonable price. However, if you were going to go for like an 85-inch Q90, you know, that thing's up in the $5,000 range, so it might not be out of the question.
So he asks, you know, is it going to be up to his standards? And the answer is, at least for me, there are times when I look at a flat panel display that's been properly calibrated or at least set up and gone, man, this really does look really, really good and quite a bit more dynamic than my projector does. And the blacks are better and, you know, everything else can be the case. The reality is once you sit in this room for longer than 2 seconds or 5 seconds and watch whatever it is, it's going to look great. So
and the size is a factor.
Yeah. If you A/B them side to side, you'd say the direct view probably has advantages over your projector, you know, regardless. But you're not doing that, and you won't do it. And to get the size that you know you might want to get here, you can't afford it.
The raw size is a big impact. Yeah, that's why I think a 5050, an Epson 5050, could definitely still satisfy you.
If I had known that there was this many parts of this question, I would not have done this. He asks, how much more expensive is it to go acoustically transparent versus a standard fixed frame screen? Considering how much more expensive it used to be, it ain't that bad. But why on God's green earth would you even consider it? This is a dedicated theater whose point it is to have home theater and games in it. You are not going to destroy all the stuff on your left wall, which is, I guess, no, is it left wall? Yeah, left wall. All that bookshelf garbage over there. You're not going to turn this into like a Star Trek theme thing. You're not going to, you know, acoustically wrap everything in acoustically transparent fabric so that you can do all kinds of stuff. You're just putting, you know, a home theater in this room. Yes, you could do it. I don't know why you would. I don't think you should. I think you should just go with a regular screen, save all that money, go with regular speakers, save all that money and hassle, and be done with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you stick with Silver Ticket for both, you're talking $250 for a 120-inch white screen and $400 for an acoustically transparent white screen. So
not double.
That would be that. Now, of course, if you're going for motorized and you want the least expensive, I'd probably point you to Elite, because when it comes to motorized and acoustically transparent, there'd be that, and you're looking in the about $700 range. And then if you're going for what I do think is the best acoustically transparent material, which is Seymour AV, you're looking at about $1,000. So somewhere between $250 and $1,000 is where your screen will land. But no, I'm in agreement with Tom. I mean, with the way the room is laid out, there's no reason why this projection screen, unless you are going to do the projection screen in front of a flat panel idea. If you're going to do that, then I'll probably point you to Elite, and you're probably looking at about $700, and you probably will want it to be acoustically transparent, just so you aren't. Well, you wouldn't even really need to, though, right?
You wouldn't.
No,
need
you'd
it
have
to
the
be
you'd have
acoustically
the center
transparent.
speaker below the flat panel. Yeah, it wouldn't need to be. So now you're down to like $500. So yeah, somewhere in that range.
So he asked, instead of a full false wall, which no one in this conversation so far has suggested, should he consider a motorized drop-down screen? We have suggested that just seconds ago.
Sure.
He doesn't necessarily want his room to have the look of an actual theater, so then why are you considering a false wall? And could a drop-down screen in front of the window and shelves work well? Yes.
It could.
Again, why? But sure. I mean, are you going to be okay with putting panels on that window and shelves? Because we're going to ask you to put panels back there, behind the speakers at the very least.
Well, I mean, I know coming up he's asking about his surround speakers. That's one of the reasons he's thinking maybe the screen goes in front. I mean, you'd for sure want to black out that window, like 100% black it out, because you don't want any light coming through the projection screen. It could be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I already said that one. What should he figure on price-wise for the cost of it? We just said this. Where should it be? We said that too. Okay, so we already talked about price and
so silver ticket if it's just going to be a standard screen mounted on the wall. Elite if you're talking about motorized, and well, if you're talking motorized, go Elite. Basically, is the answer.
And if you're going acoustically transparent and you want it to be
the very
super
best,
good,
Seymour.
Yeah. Where should he put his surround speakers? We suggested having the window on the left, so he'd have shelves on the left and doors on the right. If he faces the window instead, he'd have walls on the left and right where he can mount surround speakers. He's leaning for 5.2.4, but still considering 7.2.4. Stands,
or if you stick with your original 5.2.4, there's no reason it can't go on the back wall just wide apart.
Yeah, nice and wide
apart, because you've got a nice wide room, and they can go on that back wall. You could use something like prime elevation speakers with a bit of an angle to them if you want to, or something like that.
Or the Boston Acoustics ones that we've been talking about. You can use those as well.
Or just regular wall mounts with somewhat of a pivot. It could, absolutely work. So,
I don't love the idea of 7.2.4.
If you're doing the two rows, if you're doing the two rows and only having a foot between the back row and the back wall, sticking with the 5 makes a lot of sense. And just have them on the back wall nice and wide apart.
Because I've got my back seats are directly below my surround back speakers. They get nothing from there. So any suggestions for an inexpensive 55-inch TV for the bedroom? We're off topic here.
Different place.
Monty was thinking a TCL 6 series, unless we say something else is better for about the same price or less. TCL is generally pretty much the best price right now.
Yeah, I mean, that 6 series,
Vizio,
$500 for that 55-inch with full array local dimming and Dolby Vision and all the bells and whistles. Yeah, I mean, Vizio is going to be the only alternative. And at that price point, I guess you could look at the new M series Quantum.
Yeah.
But it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So... that TCL 6 series at 55 inches.
Do you like
great.
Roku or you like Chrome? Because those are really
honestly, that is the way to decide. Yeah.
Yeah. So Monty has the Ascend Sierra 2 speakers and likes them very much. But if you wanted even better speakers, what sort of price point range would he be looking at? What would be some examples, and what would be their benefits over the Sierra 2? He doesn't have the RAL.
It does have the RAL. That is the Sierra 2.
It does have the RAL ones? Oh, wow. Geez, okay.
This is when once you have speakers at sort of the level of the Sierra 2, I'm like, almost everything else is more likely to be your limiting factor at that point.
Yeah.
To get to the point where everything else, including your room, is at the point where you could possibly discern an actual improvement in the speakers, you're much more likely to find a different sounding speaker that you might like on a personal level even more, as opposed to objectively better in some way. It's pretty hard.
You could get louder.
You can get
lower.
More even dispersion in every direction, because the CR2s have very wide horizontal dispersion but narrow vertical dispersion. So, I mean, something I could point you to would be like JBL's Synthesis, the things that are based on their M2 professional monitors, which are $10,000 a piece.
The Status line at
Status
RBH.
Acoustics from RBH, which now you're into $30,000 a pair and up.
That's a little ridiculous. The top of the regular RBH line too should compete pretty well.
Right, maybe some of the top of the line legacy audio stuff. potentially. Again, you're looking sort of in the $12,000 to $17,000 price range, starting there. So I mean, you ask, kind of what are you getting? What are you benefiting over the CR2s? All of those can play louder. They do all have, well, the legacies don't have taller vertical dispersion. They're about the same. They're using that folded ribbon.
Right.
So I mean, the JBL, one reason why I like that $10,000 JBL M2 is because, it's exceedingly even dispersion in every direction, ruler flat, can play exceedingly loud. I mean, it's all the things that you could possibly look for. So that'd be about it. But you could certainly do different. You could do something that sounds different from the CR2s.
Right. So he asks, how did the Martin Logan Motion Series bookshelf speakers compare to the Sierra 2s?
They're not as good.
Okay. The Motion ones, or which one?
They're the folded ribbon tweeter one. They're the folded ribbon guys.
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to go to the higher end line, the full panels of Martin Logan, then you would be looking at a speaker that, I mean, just had completely different characteristics.
Yes.
They dead on just for you as you were listening to them. They may be objectively better, imaging wise than the Sierra 2s.
In one seat.
The guy sitting next to you is not going to feel the same way you do. So, I don't think the Motion Series would compare. And he asked what are the pros and cons of electrostatic speakers, and we just kind of started talking about that. The pros and cons are the dispersion, the left-right dispersion. The imaging is insane.
I mean, they're basically headphones without headphones. That's what you're dealing with. There's one extremely small sweet spot if they're set up correctly.
But if they're set up correctly and they're, good electrostatic speakers and you are sitting in the right spot, they are not just headphones. They are like get out of my head headphones. They are insanely good. You haven't had headphones as good as these. Of course, you just spent $20,000 on them, and you have to sit in a specific spot, a specific seat across the room from people. But that's the way it is.
I mean, I would pretty much never pick electrostatic speakers for any environment where I want an audience of listeners. If the audience is one person, that is where I might consider electrostatic speakers. I mean, that's sort of the pro and the con right there, because they can do things imaging-wise that pretty much, well, I can't say no other speaker, but pretty close to no other speaker can do.
I've never heard a speaker that was better than an electrostatic speaker.
But the reason is because
imaging.
While the speaker is some 10 feet away from you and out to the sides, the difference in sound between what is reaching your left ear versus your right ear is so significantly different that's what creates that ridiculous holographic imaging. But of course, it only works if you are precisely aligned with your left and right ear. So, yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I have sat there and gone, lean to the left like this, and then I lean to the right like that, and the imaging changed significantly. So we're not talking like, oh, it's good for one seat, and me and my wife can sit in the same seat. No, you cannot. Not unless she's sitting on your lap and your head's hurt.
So I guess when some people talk about the difference between music speakers and movie speakers, I mean, it's a little bit, if you're talking about a one person listening to 2-channel only, then electrostatic speakers can offer you some stuff that pretty much no other speaker can, but I would pretty much never put it in a home theater where I want more than one listener.
I know. Martin Logan has been trying to bust in the home theater market for a long time because there's so much more money there than there is in the 2-channel stuff.
Going with the folded ribbon tweeters is a good way to do it. At least they have wide horizontal dispersion.
It is, and that's why they did that. Once these folded ribbon tweeters became a little bit more accessible, then you started seeing them do that. But before that, they had the panels on the walls that could come out and you could whatever, and
motorized.
And it was terrible. Just didn't work. I mean, I sat in there in a room full of like 30 people. We were sitting way far away. So that when these things, they had as much chance to disperse as possible. And
but they don't disperse.
I just stood up and I walked from one side of the room to the other. I was like, Clint, are you hearing this? And he's like, yep. He's just following me back and forth as we're walking.
That is the nature of a true dipole that is putting out every bit as much sound out the back parallel to the sound coming out the front, and there's a true null, so there is no dispersion to the sides.
All right, so that's going to be it. Who's left?
Andrew L., and that's it. Andrew will answer you next week.
All right. Let's go ahead and thank the listeners of the week. We want to thank our 85 patrons over at patreon.com. And we also want to thank Tom for talking us up to Elite Home Theater seating and accessories for less. Yes,
that's right, Tom. Thank you for talking us up. Thank you to our 85 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, and drop by avrant.com and click on Support AVRant if you'd like to give a one-time donation via PayPal.
This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. If you want your question to be answered on this podcast, email us at question@avrant.com. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.